Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is 6:30, so we will go ahead and call this meeting of the Alpharetta City Council to order. Note for the record that all members of council are present and accounted for, and as we always do, we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you're able, please stand and join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item up on the agenda this evening is the consent agenda. And the consent agenda consists of the council meeting minutes from the meeting of July 26, 2021, and alcoholic beverage license application for PH-21-AB-21, Cracker Barrel, Old Country Store, Inc., DBA Cracker Barrel, 611-5580 Windward Parkway. Is there anyone on council who would like to remove anything from the consent agenda this evening? Seeing none, I'll call for a motion.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
We have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell and a second by Councilman Hypes, I believe that was. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please vote yes. Otherwise, vote accordingly. And it does pass unanimously with Councilmember Burnett abstaining. He was not present. So we'll move on to the next portion of tonight's meeting, which is the public hearing. Public hearing consists of two items. The first will be Z-21-05, V-21-13, Morrison Park, The Mix. Mr. Woodman, I believe you're up.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The first item before you this evening is a rezoning and variance to allow a mixed-use development consisting of 35 single-family detached homes, 140 townhomes, and 41,800 square feet of a retail restaurant. It's on 24.76 acres in the North Point overlay. Since the Planning Commission meeting, the applicant has reduced the total number of units by 6 units. They reduced the number of 14-foot townhomes from 70 units to 52 units. They added additional residential guest parking, and they pushed the buildings back along Haynesbridge and Morrison Parkway to meet the 20-foot setback. The proposed development density is 7.07 dwelling units per acre. The applicant is requesting a rezoning from O&I office institutional to MU mixed use. Variances are also requested to reduce the minimum lot size. MU requires a minimum 25 acres. They're also requesting to eliminate the minimum office percentage, which MU requires a minimum 25% office. And they're also asking to modify some streetscape standards. I have the location map on the overhead. This property is located at the northwest corner of Haynesbridge Road and Morrison Parkway. This property is undeveloped. It was recently cleared in conjunction with a timber harvest permit, and it has the Georgia Power transmission lines coming through the middle of the property. Surrounding properties are zoned O&I, except for the property to the northwest is zoned R10M. Property is bound by Morrison Parkway to the south, FedEx to the west, Vantage Point subdivision to the northwest, and Haynesbridge Road to the east. Northwinds and the Lakeview or 360 Tech Village master plans are located to the east and south, and the comprehensive land use plan amendment, comprehensive land use plan designation of the property is mixed use. And as I mentioned before, this is located within the North Point overlay. As I mentioned, the variance is being requested to reduce the minimum lot size in MU from 25 to 24.76 acres, so they're just off by about 1/4 of an acre of meeting the 25. Also, to eliminate the 25% office requirement in MU, staff is supportive of that variance request. This is the overall area of the property being located here. And you have the square footage of office buildings in the vicinity, which is the North Winds master plan as well as the Lakeview master plan. There's nearly 2.5 million square feet of future office and existing over 2 million square feet of office existing in the North Winds in Lakeview area currently. The applicant is proposing pedestrian crossings from the development over to the North Winds area. There's pedestrian crossings down to the Lakeview development to the south, as well as at the main intersection of Haynesbridge and West Side that will get the office workers over to the development. With regard to the variance for the proposed streetscape modifications, the applicant requested reductions in the size of the planters, the sidewalks, and the landscape strips. They were previously asking for a variance to reduce setbacks along Haynesbridge and Morrison Parkway, but they have changed the site plan to meet the minimum setbacks along those roads. This is the applicant's latest site plan. The single-family detached lots are depicted. Here's a cluster on the north end of the development as well as on the south end of the development. Just to orient you real quick, this is Haynesbridge, Morrison Parkway. Commercial development is limited to this area here, and the remainder of the development is residential. There are 3 different types of townhome product that you see through the middle of the development. Townhomes and commercial buildings along the main streets are oriented to those streets. With regard to the 3 townhome products, there is a 21-foot wide townhome with a rooftop. There's a 20-foot townhome and a 14-foot townhome. The townhomes range in size from 1,450 square feet to 2,200 square feet. They're all 3-bedroom, except the 14-foot townhomes are 2-bedroom. With regard to the 14-foot townhomes, each has 1 space in the garage and 1 space in the driveway. The applicant did expand the guest parking since this was presented to Planning Commission, and they now have at least 1 guest parking space per 14-foot townhome unit within the development. All other product types, including the single-family detached, has 2 parking spaces in the garage as well as 2 in the driveway, in addition to guest and on-street parking. The single-family detached lots are approximately 3,600 square feet in size. The homes will be about 2,500 square feet, 3- and 4-bedroom units. There are 61 guest parking spaces and 8 on-street parking spaces within the residential portion of the development. And then there are another 31 parking spaces, on-street parking spaces along this driveway adjacent to the commercial development. Those could be shared between the commercial and residential areas. Within the commercial area, there's 41,800 square feet of retail and restaurant proposed. The applicant's site plan depicts 5 buildings. Of course, there's a corner building, and I have an elevation of that concept plan to show you. The building actually appears on the site plan to be detached, 2 detached buildings, but you'll see from the conceptual renderings that they are actually attached. This building is called out on the site plan. These buildings are called out on the site plan to be 2 stories. The other buildings are called out to be 1 story. We do have a condition that would require 2 stories or 24 feet. Just to make sure that we have that building height on the road. The applicant has not identified any end users in the commercial area of the site as of yet. And that area will be served by 158 surface parking spaces, and then there is an underground parking that will accommodate another 100 parking spaces in this area. There's 4.15 acres of civic and amenity space shown on the applicant's site plan, which includes pocket parks, public plazas, the Alpha Loop, community gardens, patios and porches, yards and lawns, outdoor dining, and amenitized stormwater facilities. And probably one of the most important things with this development is the Alpha Loop. So the Alpha Loop is this darker line running down Haynes Bridge before entering the site, running along the new internal street between the residential and commercial areas, and then exiting the site at Morrison and Lakeview. That section of Alpha Loop on this property is approximately 0.38 miles. And it does maintain, the Alpha Loop does maintain at least a 10-foot setback from all buildings on site. This is within the North Point overlay, so there are eco-district requirements. A minimum of 7 eco-district points are required for the development, of which the applicant proposes 11 points. Though the final determination on the eco-district points typically occurs during land disturbance permit. The applicant did provide a traffic study as well as a trip generation, which indicated that the site would generate 288 AM peak hour trips and 192 PM peak hour trips. According to our traffic engineer, the intersections are operating at acceptable level of service and will continue to perform suitably in the future. This is one of the conceptual renderings of the building at the corner of Haynes and Morrison Parkway. As I mentioned, it does, the two buildings do attach. Here's a conceptual of some townhomes along Morrison Parkway. And this is specifically called out the 14-foot townhome product. So it does look like this is actually 2 units. You'll see there's 2 doors here. So the 14-foot goes to the center line of this building. This item was shown to the public at the May 12th Community Zoning Information Meeting. There were some questions from a resident of Vantage Point, which is the subdivision to the northwest, with regard to the type of screening proposed along the common property line and pedestrian access between the 2 properties. We do have a condition that deals with the buffer adjacent to this, to Vantage Point. Staff has reviewed the applicant's proposal and finds that the rezoning and variance requests do not conflict with the established criteria. The proposed mixed-use zoning complies with the future land use designation of the property, and the development is consistent with the North Point LCI. The variance to reduce the lot size in MU represents a reduction of less than 1%, and a similar variance was approved at Northwind Summit. The request to reduce the minimum office or eliminate the minimum office percentage can be supported based on the existing and future office and the adjacent master plans. And there are certain streetscape changes can be supported given the transmission lines running through the site, as well as making accommodations for the Alpha Loop. If approved, we are recommending that the 20-foot landscape strip and setback be provided along Haynesbridge Road in Morrison with staff approval of decorative hardscape encroachments between the building and the street. In addition, planters planted along planted with street trees shall be provided along all internal streets with sidewalks. We did present this item to the Planning Commission on June 3rd. Staff recommended approval subject to 40 conditions. There were no public comments on this item, and after discussion, Planning Commission recommended unanimous approval subject to staff's recommended conditions, and they did accept a couple of the changes requested from the applicant. Those were highlighted in the staff report in red. Since the Planning Commission's staff also added to some of the conditions within the staff report that you have before you. And those concerns that we addressed in the conditions was to address the 14-foot townhomes, so specify a max number of 14-foot townhomes. The commercial buildings at the corner to be developed within the first phase of development with the rest of the residential. And then making sure that the buildings at the corner are at least 2 stories. And then we added a condition to address the screening of HVAC units. And then I will go through the conditions recommended by Planning Commission. Condition 1 is the site plan specific condition, referencing the latest site plan dated July 16, 2021. 2 is the residential density. 3 is architecture and materials, and noting that the for sale residential development would be reviewed by staff and commercial reviewed by DRB. You'll notice that there are some changes in the applicant's markups to the conditions that also suggest additional changes with staff is in agreement with, that any portions of the residential portion of this development, the landscaping, the site, as well as the building architecture would be reviewed by staff, and the commercial portions would be reviewed by DRB. That's consistent with what we've done in other mixed-use developments. Condition 4 are the development regulations for 35 for sale single-family detached homes and 140 for sale townhomes, permitted with a max height of 3 stories or 40 feet. 14-foot townhome shall be limited to no more than 52 units and shall have no more than 2 bedrooms. No more than 10% of the homes, units homes shall be rented as stated in the HOA docs. 4B, retail restaurant, and we just put office in there because even though the development is not proposing office, we want office to be allowed if they get like a dentist's office or something like that within the commercial area. So that states maximum 41,800 square feet shall be permitted, not including outdoor dining areas. Minimum building height shall be 2 stories or 24 feet with a maximum height of 3 stories. Commercial buildings at the corner of Haynesbridge and Morrison Parkway shall be at least 2 stories and shall be constructed in the first phase of development with the residential uses. Restaurants shall include outdoor dining areas, no drive-through restaurants. Commercial areas shall be replanted with a 100-foot buffer to city buffer standards along Haynesbridge Road and Morrison Parkway if construction does not commence within 12 months from the start of construction. So specifically, if the corner buildings are built in phase 1 with the rest of the residential, we wanted to make sure that the balance of the commercial, which is this pocket here, so if this sits for more than 12 months after construction has commenced, the applicant would have to replant a 100-foot buffer along Haynesbridge. Condition 5 establishes the uses within the master plan. Condition 6 limits the retail uses on the site. Condition 7 deals with the minimum parking requirements for townhome units. 8 is the Haynesbridge Road streetscape standard. So as you recall, the applicant is requesting some variances to the streetscape standards. Staff was okay with some variances, but not all. So we specify the streetscape that we would be okay with there for Haynesbridge in condition 8. Same thing for condition 9, except for that is for the streetscape for Morrison Parkway. And then condition 10 deals with the streetscapes required for the new internal streets. So all the streets created within the development. Condition 11 deals with the landscape strips requiring that they be exclusive of utilities or easements. Condition 12 indicates what cannot be within required landscape areas. Condition 13 deals with the perimeter setbacks and landscape strips requiring a 10-foot setback and landscape strip on the side rear property lines. Condition 14 deals with the buffer, and the applicant, and it was within the packets, provided a buffer section adjacent to Vantage Point. So condition 14 references that exhibit. Condition 15, raised crosswalks depicted within the development shall consist of decorative hardscape surface as approved by DRB. Condition 16 requires that parking for residential areas be met within those residential areas. 17 are the required tree saves. Condition 18 is the minimum open space as shown on the site plan dated July 16, 2021. 19 addresses the 11 eco-district points. 20 addresses the developer's responsibility to upgrade existing signalized intersection at the 2 project entrances. And then we get into the design conditions. 21, orientation of the townhomes to the main roads, Haynesbridge and Morrison Parkway, and then requiring that those front yards be framed with low wall or hedge. And then in condition number 21, at the very end, is where we address the HVAC equipment. The applicant has proposed a new condition to address the HVAC equipment, and I believe that it's more appropriately addressed within the applicant's condition number 41, although we may need a slight modification to the exhibit, which I'll go ahead and show you. So this is the Echo Apartments at Westside Parkway and Encore Parkway. And we just really like the way that they screen the HVAC equipment. They use a combination of landscaping and wooden slats. They provide the wooden slats that have been painted dark to blend in, provide the necessary ventilation. And this is like right, not at the street, but just off the sidewalk. And this is looking at that from the sidewalk. And you really, it's very, very hard to tell because they've done such a good job at screening those. Condition 22 requires the enhanced pedestrian crossings at the intersection of Haynesbridge Road and Rainwater Boulevard. And I think I have, yeah, I do right there. So it would be this upper, so this is the exhibit that you probably are familiar with. This was presented by our consultant MKSK with the trail feasibility study. So this is the intersection at the Georgia 400 ramp and Haynes Bridge. And so this is most likely what that enhanced crosswalk will be, which has the piano keys. You can't really see it from this. You may not be able to see it, but there's at the tips of the piano keys, they have a green. They're green just to indicate the eco-district. '23 requires the pedestrian and bicycle connections throughout the development. 24 deals with the detention facilities, making sure that they're either not visible from the public right-of-way or that they're a decorative water feature. 25 deals with the original sculptures. So there were, staff has recommended developer provide at least 2 original sculptures within the development. Those could be sculptures, murals, or the North Point District thresholds, and those being at prominent locations throughout the development with final approval of our Cultural Arts Commission. Condition 26 they were community statements that were indicated on the applicant's site plan at the main entrances into the development. So we're just conditioning those since they are indicated on the site plan. Those are basically project signage announcing the mixed-use development. And we do have a condition in there that would require corten steel or material consistent with the eco-district. Condition 27 requires open space, green space at the corner of Haynesbridge and Morrison Parkway and all the other improvements within that area, subject to final approval by the Cultural Arts Commission. 28 are the project entrances off of Morrison Parkway and Haynes Bridge, requiring that there be a 2,500 square foot open space with some decorative improvements at that corner as well. 29 deals with the street plantings required along Haynes Bridge and Morrison, as well as the new private streets. Condition number 30 is the condition that deals with the Alpha Loop going through the development and all the associated requirements that the city would put on the Alpha Loop, as well as any amenities that the applicant has shown on the site plan in conjunction with the Alpha Loop. Condition 31 requires that retaining walls receive architectural facade treatment or be heavily landscaped. 32, these are the street furniture that would be required within the development, so the bicycle racks, the benches, the trash cans, the trash receptacles, crosswalks, and other associated street furniture along the Alpha Loop. Condition number 33 requires that prior to LDP that the applicant submit a Morrison Property Design Standards document to Design Review Board for consideration. 34, surface parking not including on-street parking shall be screened from the public right-of-way, so any of those surface parking lots that would be visible along Morrison or Haynes would need screening. 35, buildings along Haynes Bridge and Morrison Parkway requiring the orientation to be to those streets, so no back of house functions visible from the main streets. Condition 36, some requirements prior to the first land disturbance permit. 37, every plan submitted for an LDP is required to keep an ongoing density and acreage tabulation. So if they do this in phases, they would need to indicate that on the LDP documents. 38, the alcohol license distance requirements from residential development shall be waived. 39, rooftop signs shall be permitted within the development, subject to DRB. And condition number 40 requires a statement on any of the civil plans, so the land disturbance permit plans. And that concludes the presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Councilman Burnett?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Michael, 38, you hit it right at the end. Alcohol license distance requirements from residential development shall be waived. Is that strictly because in the master plan, people that are buying these houses know that that's going to be a component of it, or is that a best practice for the city based on what we've seen?
We've put that condition in our mixed-use developments since Avalon, and so I was being consistent with including it since this is the next mixed use that's coming forward. I do believe that we have some language within the actual alcohol ordinance with mixed-use developments that probably deal with that situation. So I don't even know if that condition was necessary anymore.
Yeah, just wondering. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Richard?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Michael, thanks for that thorough review of the application. Council received updates this morning from the applicant. Can you go through those and give us staff's comments on the changes that they're suggesting?
Sure. So, we did hand out a hard copy of all the applicant's markups. It's titled Applicant Brockbuilt Markups, changes shown in blue. The first change the applicant requests is to 4B. The very last sentence in 4B, they are asking for a change to require that 100-foot buffer from 12 months to 8 months, and they're changing from the word from construction to development. Staff is okay with that change. The code actually requires 18 months for the buffer to be placed back onto the property.
I'm sorry, did you say that they're asking for 8 months, or are they asking for 18?
18 months.
18.
They're asking to change it from 12 to 18 months.
Correct,
Yeah.
okay.
Condition number 14, we changed that I actually made that change, but per the applicant's inquiry, the intent is that landscaping within the residential areas are reviewed by staff, not by DRB. DRB would only review the commercial areas. So that's the change in 14.
Michael, if I could I just clarify back on the condition regarding the 18 months?
Yes.
Define development for me. When would we determine that development had begun?
I think the intent, at least of the applicant's change here, because I did discuss this change, is the applicant felt like construction was vertical construction, whereas development, he's thinking that that's actual installation of the infrastructure, utilities, roads, sidewalks.
Okay.
So we're fine with that, actually. That's the first thing.
And I'm fine with that too, if we don't mind, when we make the condition, let's kind of define what that is, whether it's the LDP or just so there's no question about whether development has begun. Thank you, sir. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no, you're fine. Condition number 17, the applicant is requesting to make some changes to the tree save. They've indicated that they would make reasonable efforts to save tree number 2, but recognize that that is shown in a stormwater detention area on the site plan. With regard to tree number 54, they've indicated that they just cannot save that tree because they've got some conflicts with utilities, both existing and utilities that they will be bearing in that area. They're proposing, in lieu of the 2 tree saves, in lieu of the 1 tree save, and they'll make their best efforts on the other, that they would provide 2 oversized statement trees within the development. And, we've had some discussions with the applicant about those trees. They could be at the main entrances. They have 2 roundabouts within the site plan that could be a good location for the signature trees or statement trees, or even some public art. Typically, our recompense trees are 4-inch caliper. So typically on the oversized tree, we've done that in the past. It's usually a 6-inch caliper tree.
Is the minimum on that?
Yeah, the city arborist doesn't really like to go above 6 inches on the tree, because the larger you get with the tree, the survivability will go down. As you know from the trees out front of City Hall, those had to be replaced multiple times, and those were larger trees at installation, larger than the 4-inch. The change shown to condition number 19, that change was actually done by the Planning Commission, and staff did support that change. Condition number 21, the HVAC equipment screening has been stricken because there's a new condition number 41 we'll get to in just a second. But earlier in that condition, we did change DRB to staff there again. Residential being reviewed by staff as opposed to commercial being reviewed by DRB. On condition 25 with the sculptures, the applicant has added a sentence to the end limiting the budget for the sculptures and artwork to not exceed $100,000. Condition number 29, again, that condition is specifying who reviews the commercial areas versus residential areas, staff and DRB. Condition 30 deals with the Alpha Loop, and the applicant is requesting a change to deal with the trigger for when the Alpha Loop must be installed. The initial staff recommendation was at first CO, which is what we have done on other similar type developments with the Alpha Loop going through it. But the applicant's concern with that really deals with constructing that improvement, and then while things are still being constructed, it could be torn up. There was a color-coded site plan. I was just trying to find mine. The applicant provided, and that has also been handed out to each of you. And basically what they state in condition 30 is what they're showing to you on that color-coded site plan. I believe the last condition change was new condition number 41. The applicant states the developer shall shield the AC units behind the townhomes using a combination of fencing and landscaping as shown in Exhibit A. This was the applicant's Exhibit A, showing the rear of
Excuse me,
townhomes.
Mr. Woodman, I believe Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell had a question.
Oh, sure.
I think you were getting to it. Thank you,
Oh,
Mayor.
okay. I'm
So this is Exhibit A, so we're throwing the other two exhibits out from the Eco District, is that correct? That you had shown earlier?
If you were to accept the applicant's requested change to add 41, if you prefer not to reference this, we can reference, I would recommend that you accept applicant's condition number 41 and add in staff Exhibit A, which references these exhibits that I showed you earlier.
Okay, I think it would be beneficial to have both, especially since they want to use a combination of the two, so, between landscaping and the hard surface. Thank you.
Yep.
Please proceed.
I think that was their last change, was condition 41.
Councilman Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Michael, one last question. The site plan identifies I'm looking at condition number 22, the enhanced pedestrian crossings. And when I look at it, the Morrison and Rainwater does not have a specific width identified, whereas the other location does. Morrison and Haynes Bridge is 18 feet in width, but they don't have any width called out on the Morrison and Rainwater. What's our enhanced pedestrian? What's our typical width?
Yeah, we did talk to our transportation engineer on this, and he would require a 12-foot width on this crossing here, this enhanced crossing. And that is consistent with this enhanced crossing that we see here.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions from Council? Councilman Hypes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got four things I want to touch on, Mr. Woodman. First, starting with the traffic count. I noted on page 89 of the packet that the traffic count was done on January 27th of 2021. Thank you, Mr. Graves. And obviously things were a little slower in terms of traffic on the streets in January. So in terms of the traffic count for this location, and by location I'm talking, coming down Haynes Bridge as you're approaching 400. I have a question about the validity of the numbers as adjusted by some figure, a factor of 1.5, 1.4. And then secondly, if you, Mr. Woodman or Mr. Graves would address, I don't see where the traffic count takes into account Northwind Summit, 360 Tech Village. We've just had Jackson Healthcare come online with the greatly expanded campus, although in January we really don't know the full effect of those office buildings brimming with action. So put my mind at ease that after all of these developments are built, we'll still be able to get on and off of 400.
Currently, Haynesbridge Road is a 6-lane facility and has quite a bit of capacity available to it. The counts that were done for this particular project were done early in the year and had some COVID adjustment factors applied to them. When they compared against the DOT, Georgia DOT's permanent counting stations, they also looked at some counts that we had from 2018. So they looked at historical data and was able to and presented an adjustment factor for that historical data. The two access points for this project are signalized. They will be adding a fourth leg to each of these signalized intersections. And even, with the additional intersections there, those two access points will be operating, or are predicted to operate at level of service A and level of service B, depending on whether you're on Haynes Bridge or on Morrison Parkway.
Can you, for the uninitiated, and I'm going to include me, tell me about levels A and B?
Levels A and B, well, so we would look at levels of service based on delay experienced by all users that go through that traffic signal. So for instance, if they're on these two intersections, we'll be looking at all of the users that go through entering the development as well as the ones that are just traveling through on Haynes Bridge Road. So if you stop Haynes Bridge Road for a short period of time, you have so many users on there, you will have an increase that average delay quite a bit. Whereas the side streets with fewer users, you can stop them for a long time without increasing the average delay for a long period of time. So we take that into mind, that we know that we're going to time the traffic signals so that we optimize the corridor timing on Haynes Bridge Road on West Side / Morrison Parkway, and we would give the side streets the minimum amount of time of the cycle length to access the new center here. And we believe that since we have A and B levels of A and level B intersection levels of service, that's based on all users going through that intersection, that still says that we have quite a bit of capacity to handle even the additional traffic that may be born once COVID's gone, or even with the new developments coming on board.
So with Northwind Summit and what I call 360 Tech Village, I've heard other names thrown about that don't seem to have stuck, and this development, these were all forested areas. These are not redeveloped areas. These were areas that had no traffic count. They just had trees and deer.
Correct.
And this is all plus traffic count. Have we looked at this sort of in this area as sort of a mega center of new activity where we had a traffic count from 360 Tech Village and from Northwind Summit, and we have one from the mix? But do we know how all that fits together for the city of Alpharetta?
We try to address that with some of the traffic studies. For instance, on Northwind Summit, we did have them look at traffic from Tech 360 also, and so that we can make sure that we're compounding those numbers and try to get a handle on what's going to occur there. At this particular location, access to 400 is really the biggest bottleneck of the system, and it could be like when Georgia 400 was expanded several years ago. That might go away with the with the managed lanes in 8 years, and it's an estimated guess as to what's going to happen in the future.
Let me ask it differently. Have we looked at this? Have we studied the combined projects that are being built? Have we looked at it, given it our best estimation of what's going to happen, and are we comfortable with it?
I believe we have. Once again, Tech 360, Northwind Summit, those studies were looked at as being compounding upon each other. This one we didn't really. I don't believe we had the developer study include some of those other traffic numbers in there, but there was additional capacity on these two intersections that would, be sufficient for the other improvements that are being contemplated.
All right, thank you. Mr. Woodman, I have a question. You had brought up something about biking within the development. I know there's a bike share station. Are there designated bike lanes within the development?
So the Alpha Loop would
I guess
represent.
that would be the most
Yeah.
logical, I guess. But
Yeah.
And that would address it. My next question is on condition number 39. Is there municipal code definition of what a rooftop sign is?
No, we don't have that particular signage in the sign code as of yet.
We recently saw a sign on Davis Drive. That's what I would call a rooftop sign in the absence of a definition. Is this going to be something similar where there's going to be, a brace and a sign on top of one of the buildings? At least are we going to permit that by this condition, a rooftop sign?
That's the intent of the condition, yes.
And without knowing what that means in our code, do we have any dimensions on what that may look like, other than, I think we have some conditions on the lighting of such a sign. And we went through that on Davis Drive a little bit.
Yeah. And I wasn't at that meeting, so I don't recall what the discussion on the Davis Drive situation was, but it is subject to Design Review Board approval. I believe that we've put this on any of the, since 360 Tech Village, Lakeview, we've been including that rooftop signage condition within some of these developments, that allowance.
I thought we had a definition in the code of what a sign on the side of a building is called, as
Like a
distinguished from
perpendicular?
something that sits on top of the building. No, maybe? I'm looking over at Kathy and you.
Are you talking about a blade sign or a perpendicular sign?
No, just like a Walgreens sign, on the side of a building.
Oh, like a wall sign.
A wall sign.
Yeah.
So we have a wall sign and we have a rooftop sign. Those are actually two different kinds of signs. It says it will be permitted, and when I see final approval by DRB, that to me tells me this allows for a rooftop sign, but DRB weighs in on what it looks like.
What it looks like, that it's consistent, that the size is appropriate to the building.
And is this for any building of their choosing within the development?
Yeah, the way that it's written, it could be on multiple buildings. If you would like to restrict it, we should probably make a change to that condition.
Well, offline, I expressed a strong desire not even to have any wall signs facing Haynesbridge and Morrison. If there's I believe I even may have brought up an example of the building that's up there at the Taco Mac building at Highway 9, where, you drive by and there's every little sign you can see. And this is going to be the first building you see coming up Haynesbridge, because Tech 360 is going to be down the hill. So this is the gateway building, and I don't know if it's going to look like a NASCAR with a lot of advertising all over it. I don't know if it's going to have some sign like we saw for Davis Drive staring us in the eye, or I don't know whether, in my mind, as I expressed a preference, the signage would all be inward facing toward the development, and it would be a nice clean look and not, State Farm and, whichever chiropractor, et cetera, all around the building.
Yep.
So, we'll get to discussion in a little bit, but I had no understanding there'd be a rooftop sign until recently. So, and then lastly, I wanted to ask you about the Alpha Loop. The Alpha Loop's important to the city. Did we experience any problems with the Alpha Loop in terms of its being protected or broken up? Because at Northwind Summit, they built the Alpha Loop, and then they built the buildings. Went over there on the Alpha Loop before the buildings were built. And did they experience problems with the Alpha Loop when they constructed buildings after first constructing the Alpha Loop?
I'm not aware of any. I don't deal with the day-to-day land development, but I do manage the person in that role.
Oh, Eric's out of the
Eric
seat.
may be a little bit more familiar.
Yeah, when they came in and we're going to be doing the buildings adjacent to, what they designated as the Alpha Loop, we went ahead and let them hold off on some of the finishes for the Alpha Loop until those actual adjacent buildings were constructed and they were not going to be interrupted in the future. So, we had them hold off on finishing that portion of the Alpha Loop. So they had the base course down, but I think there were some architectural finishes. We had the medallions that still need to be placed and some other streetscape.
So parts of it can be completed almost as you're pouring the streets and the curbs, it's along with the infrastructure, is that not correct?
Correct. And then, but, if they damage anything during the construction of the buildings, we require them to go and replace those portions.
Yeah. All right, I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Graves, before you sit down, I just had a couple of points. I appreciate Councilman Hype's questioning about the traffic and the signage. Wanted to follow up on some that his questions about the traffic
Yes, sir.
brought to mind, and Director Sisevich may even want to jump in at some point. First one was, when we do those projections, do they incorporate the additional 4 lanes on Georgia 400 that'll be constructed in the next few years?
As far as doing traffic projections, it's kind of difficult to
No, but I mean the service levels. I'm sorry, I wasn't more clear.
At this point, no, because we try to look at when, this development will be in service. That's the horizon year for each individual development application.
Okay. And on a similar note, but a little more, just for my information moving forward, I don't know if anyone on council's given much thought to this. We've had discussions over the last year, the impact of COVID on rush hours and things like that. And what I've heard from Director Sisevich and other professionals is they think that rush hour, as we knew it traditionally beforehand, is probably not going to be as huge a jump between 7:30 and 9, and that we'll, in general, have more congestion throughout the day as there's more flexibility, more people working from home. Is that something y'all incorporate into your thinking on any of these plans?
It is. We are starting to look at longer peak hour periods. Instead of looking at 7 to 9, we'll be looking at 6 to 10, and for the morning peak hour, and similarly in the afternoon, a little bit longer peak hours, just so that we make sure that we capture that highest component. When we're talking specifically for intersections, it's really how much traffic do we have in that 15 minutes or 1 hour. How much traffic can we fit through during one cycle of the light? And so we look, we break those into smaller chunks, but we want to try to make sure that we get that maximum hour. So typically we'll have either evaluate that with a 24-hour count, so we can plot where the actual peak hours are and make sure that we look at that for the intersection, or if we have what we've been doing in those last couple of years is we have good counts from 2018 at a lot of places, so we're just using that as our base data, which is about 50% higher than what it's about 50% higher than what our current traffic is now. So.
Right, and none of us have a crystal ball to know for sure, but I was just trying to get the professional opinion of what y'all anticipate, because if we traditionally say at an intersection like West Side and Haynes, we had 1,200 cars a day at that intersection or something like that within 2 hours, and in the future we don't see it being quite as steep a peak during those 2 hours, but there'll be more cars through the next 3 or 4 hour period.
Right, and they'll help out with, you're not going to have the intensity at those peak hours, and spreading that over the life of the day really helps out with keeping the mobility throughout town. You don't have those periods a day where you just can't move. When I first moved here, I was going to go visit my brother in Swanee, and it took me an hour just to get past Old Milton Parkway. So having people with their more flexible schedules and having that traffic be a little bit more consistent, it's easier to program those corridors to move those traffic throughout the day versus having to try to build these huge roads for an hour of the day that's everybody's driving at the same time.
Hopefully that it will be true.
That's our hope.
And that's all I had for you on traffic. Thank you. Mike, I just wanted to go back to the signage question, but the maximum square feet of signage remains the same as the normal code, right?
We do have a max under prohibited signage. We do have a maximum size of a sign. I believe it's 156 square feet. I'd need to reference that in the code, though. But
Okay, I just want to make sure that all the general codes
yeah, there's
apply.
a prohibition there, so any sign could not exceed that because it's under the prohibited signage in the sign code.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for staff from council? Councilman Richard.
Sorry, one more question on the rooftop sign. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 commercial buildings on the site plan, and the way that the rooftop sign condition 39 is written, in theory, they could have a rooftop sign on every commercial building, the way that it's written today?
Yes. I don't think that was really our intent, so I would definitely, if there's any inkling that you would keep the condition, I definitely think that we should restrict it further. And I think the intent was that you would have like kind of the rooftop signage was promoted here in these mixed-use developments because it is more creative type signage. And that was the intent, was to get more creative type signage. But our intent was really to have maybe one signature rooftop sign that would announce the development.
And then but as a city and a code, we don't have a specific definition on, I mean, it would have to fit within what we were just talking about, but as far as the height and.
We have no regulation for any
We have
of
no
that.
regulations on that?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell.
I just wanted to comment on the signage, and I agree with Councilmember Hypes as far as the Taco Mac building. That was kind of an 80s kind of design style, and you have all these different colors no matter what. And I think that in the discussion with Mr. Brock, you were okay with a sign package. I'll ask you later about it, but there's things like West Side Provisions downtown that's doing it where it's much more toned down, and it's actually more of a retro look with those, like one main sign on top of the building, and then smaller signs that aren't glaring in your face or rear lit like that would be very troublesome, I think, to most of us if that were the case. So perhaps if we could get a sign package and get the DRB to approve it, and maybe even limit the amount of signs that could go on the rooftop to 1 or 2.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I did hear Councilman Hype's question for the applicant about that, and it wasn't that we weren't addressing it in the conditions. Signage is one of those things that we have to be really careful with, and to limit or restrict signage that's already allowed in our code. That's what I was hesitant to do by adding a condition for that. I did ask the applicant if they were okay with that, to address that in the conditions. But there's not anything in there with respect to the wall signage for the tenants at that corner building. But maybe we can ask the applicant about that if they would like to limit that further.
Thank you.
Any other questions from council at this time? Thanks, sir. Would the applicant like to come forward?
Is that facing the right direction? Didn't know if it needed to be upside down or, all right. For the record, my name is Park Self, with the law firm of Sams Larkin Huff, and up here with me is Adam Brock regarding this rezoning application before you this evening. I want to state how much I appreciate your staff, Mr. Woodman, Ms. Cook, have been working with us for over close to a year. Our first meeting, not only did we have many different land plans, we had different land planners that had been commissioned by Brock to give an estimate of how they would tackle this problem. And I say problem because the first slide I put up for you to see is the existing condition. And we all know the challenge of this site. It looks great. It's at the intersection of two major roadways. It's a gateway to downtown, but it's also bisected by this power line. And so how you handle that is critical and has taken us how we approach this. And I'll start with like the Alpha Loop, because the Alpha Loop is critical to this also. And the easiest way to handle the Alpha Loop would be to run it along the roadway. If we ran it along Haynesbridge Road, Morrison Parkway, it would be adjacent to the public roadway. It would be consistent with the path, although the path that you have in your plan show it coming down and going underneath the power line, which isn't ideal either, and then coming through. But whoever develops this would have some input of how that Alpha Loop goes through. So what we did is we figured this challenge and kind of backed away. So if I can start with just the site plan. And the site plan shows us that what we did is the site really, in your land use plan even started out this way. Your land use plan until very recently had the North Point overlay stopping at the power line easement, and then that northern portion was not in the North Point overlay. And that was a recognition that that's almost a dividing line. It's like, you know, a natural division. And so one way to tackle this property is two different developments. Develop the southern part one way, use the power line, develop the northern part another way. And that would be a perfectly acceptable thing to do. What we looked at is how this relates to the other properties and how we can take on this challenge. And one of the other big features, and I consider this a transition property. And what I mean by that is you're transitioning from the intensity of 400, from the 2.5 million office, as behind us is residential. So this is a piece that transitions from those, and then it has the transition of the Alpha Loop coming through our property. So what we've done is taken that and created that transition, and I think that's one of the reasons why we've been able to get your staff recommendation for approval, your planning commission recommendation for approval, and why you have a pretty significant case before you, and very rarely do you have a case of significance and you don't have a room full of people, because I think what we've done is appropriate for this property. And so we start with the intersection, and we've got the commercial focused at the intersection, and then we transition to residential, and not only just residential, but for sale residential. I know one of the other people that have looked at it, and everyone's looked at it, is multifamily. That's the other, you know, other potential use that has looked at it. We looked at it as for sale, and some of the feedback we got, and this goes to Councilman Hypes, your comment about traffic, and that in discussion with TPA and their concerns and how we relate to them was, you know, what we really would like to have is some more for sale homes close to our offices. And it also relates to Mr. Mayor, your comments about the pandemic, and that one of the things about the pandemic has changed is we're not going to totally do away with the office, but I think we'll use the office differently. And so instead of commuting 30 minutes into the office, going there all day, and then commuting home 30 minutes, that was the old way to do it. The better way to do it is be close to your office so you can use your home office, but then jump in and jump back. And so this meets a need that we heard from the office developers that surround us, and not only with the for sale housing, but also with the retail and the commercial component at the corner that will also provide service to those office workers and our residents. We also tie that in with the connection to across Rainwater, the connection across Morrison Parkway on the Alpha Loop. And, you know, key to all this is making it one development rather than two, and tying it together with the Alpha Loop coming into our site using a half moon shape, if you will, along our roadway and coming down to the south. So that makes the Alpha Loop a lot more accessible and a lot friendlier rather than the obvious place to put the Alpha Loop is on the roadway. That's the obvious place. And it would actually solve one of the concerns I think that you had about the constructability and the timing of it. Because if you build it along the road, you can go ahead and build it today, because that's easy to build along the road because we're not going to be accessing the other side. The issue comes is that when we're building interior to a project, bring it into our project, which is better for the pedestrian, better for the bicyclist, because you're separated from all those cars and all that traffic, and you're in a more inviting setting. But it also has the challenge that we're going to not just be building on one side of that, we're going to be building on both sides of that loop. And so we've got a good solution there. I think the density and the intensity is very appropriate. We're actually below what your intend in this mixed-use environment. I think that all those elements are met, and again, one of the reasons why we have a planning commission and a staff recommendation for approval. But even with 99% of the cases I'm involved in, after we go through the planning commission, and as your staff said, that unanimous recommendation of approval, we normally would have stopped and said, all right, great, and go on. But we heard a couple of feedback about whether we were having too many of one product type in there, the 14-foot product type, how we were parking that product type, and also the staff did not like our variance along the roadway for those buffers. So it took us going back, even though we had the PC recommendation, we went back and sharpened the pencils and reduced that 14-foot product by, I think, 30%. We then made sure that not only did we have garage parking on the pad, but a guest parking that would be in close proximity to each unit. So each unit has an additional guest parking within close proximity. And we also were able to pull everything back away, so we've got all the streetscapes along there. I'd like to address some of the specific questions that you had in the signage. We certainly will be glad to have a sign package that will address the signage. Mr. Brock can go into greater detail about it, but it will be something that will be part of the pattern book, and so the colors and the scheme and everything would have to meet that. And we are not desiring roof signs, as I understand those to be defined, and I'm used to wall signs and such, but I mean, we do want to be. Yeah, we do want a full sign package, would be fine with that. I'd like to address the question about the phasing of the completion of the trail. And what we have presented to you shows the homes that are adjacent to the Alpha Loop. And again, this is very different because we're coming through our site versus if we stuck it on the edge of our site, adjacent roadways, we wouldn't be building on both sides. I mean, if we were right up against Morrison Parkway, we would just be building it there, and we wouldn't have, construction equipment that would need to get on Morrison Parkway to build a house, because we'd all be doing it internally. But when this is going through our site, which is real positive for the Alpha Loop, then now we're building on both sides of it. So I'm going to start with like the green phase down there. What we're saying on this phasing plan is we would have to complete the Alpha Loop through that section to get a CO on those homes. And those would be, those are going to be some of the first homes we want to have, because we want to create an entrance to our site. So this is going to create a natural incentive. We're not going to get COs when we're building next to the Alpha Loop until that section of the Alpha Loop, and we'll do it in these phases here. So that should give you the confidence that we will be doing it. And these are the premium lots. These are the lots that will activate the site and be make everything look active. But the reality is, like, take that blue section there. You got homes that are intentionally designed to, and let me say, I kind of messed up my presentation because I was going to give you a little beginning about Brockville. Sorry it's Monday, but it feels like Wednesday already for me. I've been dashing around so much. But Brockville is a local home builder, and one of the things they're known for is the very attractive facades and using a rear entry product. So when these homes are along the Alpha Loop, they're up close to the Alpha Loop to engage that Alpha Loop. So you get the front of the home close to it. So it's hard to build in that tight environment when you're trying to create that streetscape and that interrelationship with that, especially when you're on both sides of the road at the same time. And what we don't want, and as Mr. Graves said, there's times when you come into safety factors and things like that. We can't be having equipment coming in and having that. So what we propose is this phasing plan that will phase it and limit us getting COs on the homes that are adjacent to these different trail sections as we go through it. So that was kind of what we're proposing as there. And then if I go to just the overall colored side. North or south color. And again, I want to kind of point out some of the features that we have in this mixed-use development. As you come in from the north, there's a little bit of width in that as the right-of-way pulls away from our site a little bit, and we're taking advantage of that width. We're going to have this will be a public access area. We propose an exercise loop in that section there that'll be adjacent to the Alpha Loop. Again, adding an amenity to the Alpha Loop. When you come down to the entranceway at Rainwater, we have a kiosk that would be an entrance to, as the Alpha Loop pulls away from the roadway and comes into our site, we'll have a kiosk that will be a visual image of this is where the trail goes this way. It'll also allow the opportunity to have potentially bike rental, maybe water, things, information, visitor information, things like that at those kiosks. We have another kiosk proposed at the other site. Internal to the site, we've proposed dog parks, different in areas that would be set off, although they're stormwater areas, but they're also designed to have cattails and other growth there. And then as you go to the west, actually there is an existing trail that kind of cuts to the west that's kind of already cuts into our site. We connect to that in that area there. So the folks that currently would be able to come into our site from the west and get into our site and access the Alpha Loop from that direction, and also be able to get to the retail. Now, if I go to the very center building, which is the building A, and I think and that is, as was pointed out, is kind of the gateway building. It really frames the entrance to this and is very important for us. And we've got some architectural renderings of how that's going to be working. It's two buildings, but connected by outdoor space that'll connect them together. And you can see there how that would not only create a nice, attractive entrance, but it also connects people and invites people in. So what we want to be able to do is have something that when you drive by, you think, I want to go in there. It's not walled off. It pulls you in. It has some streetscape and some hardscaping that comes down to the intersection. I do also want to point out, I know trees are very important, as they should be. That tree number 54 is right at that intersection. It sits right there. And there is a stormwater pipe that goes underneath Morrison. Is it Morrison? It's right at the... Right, I mean, it's right at the intersection. I think it goes under Morrison, and from that end, unless we wanted an open stormwater pipe, we need to connect to it. We keep and no one wants an open pipe in that area there. So there's really no way. And then the other thing is you have overhead utilities on both Morrison. I just looking at my on my Google Earth. I love Google Earth because you can quickly. I knew there was overhead lines on Haynes Bridge, but there are also overhead lines on Morrison Parkway. We need to get those underground. So when you add in all those utilities, as much as it would be great to be able to save this tree, it really is just in a location that because of the underground conflicts and utilities, proximity to the right-of-way, it's literally like 5 feet from the right-of-way. Candidly, I'm not sure you want a big oak tree that close to the right-of-way that can blow down. But it just, I mean, there's some things I could say maybe, and some things that this just does not work. So that's that tweak on that condition related to the tree. I hope you agree with it. The other tree is in the stormwater area. We will do everything we can to try to save it. But we've also agreed, regardless of two statement trees, I think is the terminology, in the inch caliper, that 6 inches is we're great with that. We very much agree with that. If I can go back to, Mayor, your condition number 4B, your question about that, from the start of, and I changed from construction because I didn't, is that vertical, is that, I changed it to development, but if you want to change it to LDP, we can control when the LDP starts, and that's the reason why I put 18 months, because truly the development is probably going to take 12 months, so that's like 6 months of variation there. So that's the reason why I think I wrote the condition harder for us because it starts earlier, but then I just extended it to 18 months. So that was.
And just so you know, I'm not really preferential on when it's defined as being. I just want to be clear on when that is.
Yeah.
So whatever works for y'all, I would be fine with.
And then, trying to think what other ones that I wanted to make sure I addressed. And I did talk to a traffic engineer, and they did take into account Tech 360 traffic and the traffic count. And I do want to emphasize that in my own layman terms, that the way this traffic should work is by putting residential close to jobs. It should not be the residential should not be a huge traffic driver. In fact, it should theoretically, hopefully, limit the number of people that are having to drive to those office developments from further away by putting good residential close to them. Be glad to address any questions. I think hopefully we addressed your questions about the 14-foot product. I don't want to be redundant about it. Do you want me to go through what the 14-foot product is and make sure that everybody understands the
Sure. Thank you.
product? And this was the question that came up from the Planning Commission, and then we received some feedback from your staff that there were some questions and concerns. Want to make real clear that this is a product that is designed to sort of take the place of more of a stack flat condo layout. And so it is similar in size and similar in demographic to a stack flat buyer. But rather than having people living above and below each other, and that type of buying experience is different and for different reasons, this is a product that is narrower, but it feels more similar to what you would have in a typical townhome, where you own your entire vertical up and down townhome. We pair them together so that the facades are done as units of 2. So when you look at the facade, what you're looking at is a 28-foot wide home, but within each home is 2 products. And there's a couple things going on. One is the number of buyers that are, we always think everyone's living with 2 people or more, but the reality is there's a lot of buyers and a lot of people who are renters, but maybe want to be buyers who are single and don't necessarily aren't buying for 2 people, and that's a huge part of our market. But we understood the sensitivity and the question, so we've reduced that by 30%. We also understood the question about parking, and so we made sure there's plenty of parking for this. But I initially, when Adam brought this to me, I was like, this is I had not seen this before, so I had to understand what the concept was. But I have become a real advocate because I think there's a huge demand for it. Some of the kind of the quirky things that it comes out of this is the garage space is much bigger than what you have in the stack flats. It's deeper, it's wider. So yeah, it's 1 car, but so are your stack flat condos are 1-car garage, but you have more depths for storage, trash cans and bikes and things like that, and you have a little more width to it. And then also, unlike your stack flats where you may have your kitchen, some of them would have your kitchen living on the same floor, where some people like to have your kitchen separate from your living. This has your sleeping. You're living on one floor and sleeping on another floor, so that's separated, which a lot of buyers like that, where your stack flats, because they're kind of intermixed like this, you end up with some units where it's all mishmashed together. This creates a separation between your sleeping and your living, with your dining and your living room and your kitchen are on one floor and your bedrooms are on another floor. So I think it's a great product. I think in a mixed-use for-sale project like this, where we've got single-family detached homes and then two different types of townhomes, I think this is a great addition to that to provide a wider range of buyers within our community. And after I go for that, let's go back to the color site plan too. I do want to emphasize that because it's not necessarily totally intuitive in that the yellow product type that's shown here is single-family detached homes. And one of the other things that Brock is known for is clustering those homes around a green space muse. So you can see we've got single-family detached product along the edges of the perimeter of the property. Those will be selling in the, what you expect to have single-family detached in the million range. And then we have some rooftop units that are going to be also spread throughout. And then we have a 20-foot wide typical townhome, if you will, without the rooftop. And then you have the 14-foot. So again, I think you really have 4 different building types within this acreage. And I think having that diversity of housing types is very appropriate. So I think that the applicant and their land planner has done a good job of figuring a way to transition, using this transition property, how to use the power line rather than it being a negative, how to try to use it as an advantage and tying those two properties together, bringing the alpha loop within the development rather than keeping it all along the perimeter, and having the homes that will be lining that alpha loop facing the alpha loop, so it will have a very pedestrian-oriented feel to it, and will provide a housing type that is needed in this area and will support the office developments that you already have and the additional office capacity. And this transitions that intensity that you have with the 2.5 million square footage of office to the lower intensities you go through, and this creates that transition, connects it with the alpha loop, creates the commercial space that's needed there, and I think does it in a good way. And as I said, I appreciate your staff so much, and I appreciate the fact that we're here with a lot of effort gone into a lot of conditions, and they've worked very hard, and you have a wonderful staff, and you should be glad that you have them to work on things like this. And again, I hate to point out the obvious, but I'm used to standing in a room full of a lot of people that have a different amount of concerns and questions, and that's not tonight. So and I think that's a testament to Adam and his team of working on a plan that I think is a good use for this property and will be a good addition to the city.
Councilman Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To Councilmember Hypes' point about the loop, Adam, will you put the slide about the color-coded? So you're proposing to do let me ask you a question. From start to finish, how long does it take you to finish from yellow or from orange until you get to, is it blue or green? Green at the bottom.
I got to say first, I'm not positive we'll go sequentially that way, but to your real question, what we've really said is we would want to tie the COs of these units by these color designations, but we're also putting a 3-year limit on it from the time we finish horizontal. So when we start construction, within 3 years, we'll have to have the entire thing done.
So one of one of my thoughts is, and you alluded to it, if I was going to CO, the last unit is when you have to have the loop built. I can play games with it all the way down until I build the loop last. And I would like to mitigate that if there is a time frame, because I live in Excel. I get you guys live in a P&L and you're not making any money until you're done. So I'm sensitive to it. But if there is an understanding or something that you guys want to come back to us with that is a time frame from the time you get into an LDP until the loop is completed, if it's a year, if it's 15 months. I think that that is a better solution because it gives you guys something to back into, and it'll help you sell.
We actually did the color coding in addition, condition number 30, we have the trail shall be completed no later than 3 years after issuance of LDP. So we have that in there already to put a firm date. That was actually one of the comments we got during one of our various meetings, is put a time frame on it. And so we did do that. The reason I did the color coding in addition to it is so that we can, if I do start buildings, say in the blue section, all of the townhome units shown there, when I turn in a site plan, they'd have to show the alpha loop within that site plan, and it'd have to be completed. But the entirety of it needs to be done in the 3 years. And I'll tell you too, for me, I'm used to building on multi-use trails. We have a lot of belt line frontage in Atlanta. I know the value of a multi-use trail, and talking about Excel, it can juice the returns. I don't think y'all want it there more than I do, to be truthful. Our goal will be to get it in and get it done as quick as possible. The reason we're looking for that protection is because the home building side of our company will want to come up with a build-out plan. And so, to your point, I'll be able to say you have 3 years in totality, but as you do these blocks in the various colors, you have to complete those then.
So, yeah, and let me make clear, so like the green section, we wouldn't be able to build one of those green homes until that section of the Alpha Loop is done.
The entirety of it, not just
that section.
Not just the section in front of it.
And so we would be doing it, and that's and then really our incentive will be, as we build pieces, our residents and our sales will depend on us completing it. So it'll be our driver to do it. But this is actually, when you explain it to me, this is a lot harder hammer. Because like the blue section there, if we pull one building permit on that blue, we've got to do that whole, or CO.
We have to do the whole.
We have to do that whole section through there. And that part of it is safety, because we can't have people trying to walk on the Alpha Loop when there's some intensive construction going on directly adjacent to it. And that's where I get to, if it were along the road, like the orange section, that actually probably could come in, because you could just do that a lot. You'll come that in, but because you're not going to be developing really around it.
And that's a good point, is that at the very northern part of the site, the kind of orangish red section, the only reason I included it in this plan is to tie it to COs in some fashion as kind of an extra security for Alpharetta. But I'm really living by the 3 years from LDP as being it all has to be done.
Well, it's not really a question and answer. I think that is more loose than I would like. And if you looked up here, you would see people going. So, thank you.
Councilman Binder?
And when we tie stuff to LDP, one thing I want to make sure is that they're expecting, because this is going to have to be, all the drainage and development occurs on the 24 acres at one time. All of it has to be done at one time for the infrastructure. So that you're going to have basically 12 months. From LDP, you got 12 months of just site work. So we're not, so if we start talking timelines of when things start, so you won't see the first building permit probably for 12 months after LDP.
That's correct.
Councilman Binder?
Thank you. I'm going to ask the question I thought Councilmember Burnett was asking, I didn't hear an answer to. Well, how long do you think, or estimating, for all the residential, all the color-coded areas, orange, yellow, purple, blue, green, to get complete?
Ideally 3 years.
From LDP.
Right. A lot of that will be, market-driven and how many units we can move through a month. The way we'll build this is we'll start probably 10 single-family detached homes initially, and then 6 of each townhome product. And then we go to kind of a monthly cadence thereafter of, it'd be 6 townhomes a quarter, so 2 a month or so, and about 2 single-family homes a month, and let that roll through. So that area, I want to see the entire thing done in 5 years.
Okay. I didn't want to interrupt the sidebar. No, and then because during our meeting, I was the one that actually brought up the time limit. And then I said 2 years would be better than 3. 3 seems like a lifetime of constituent
so
calls and saying when this is going to be done.
That's part of what Parks was mentioning, is that from issuance of land disturbance permit, the first 12 months is just site work and grading. So 3 years really only gives me 2 years of vertical construction time.
And if you wanted to say 2 years from first building permit?
First building permit, that would be equivalent to the same 3 years of the LDP issue.
We'd be comfortable with that.
So, and then, so while y'all were speaking, I kind of looked up Google Maps, and Northwind seems to have their portion of the loop done. The Atlee has it complete, and they're building homes right now. Why can't you do it when they can?
Well, I've done a lot of it, and I've seen a lot of trails broken. As I said, my preference would be this would be done quickly, and, you know, I don't get the value from it if I sell all my houses before it's in existence and you can use it. Buyers won't pay the premium if it's not there. That said, I also know what it takes to build tight developments, and if you look at the purple, for example, there's got to be places to lay down materials. We use cranes to set every truss, and you know, I have power lines there to deal with. I can't stack heavy equipment under power lines, so stuff's going to be on both sides of that street to build just those units. Again, we'll be looking at this from a construction standpoint of how do we get it in as soon as possible, but I want to leave myself the ability to have that safety net so we can close off sections and not have it open when we have it on. My biggest concern is ongoing construction site activity, safety for people using the loop, and the fact that I'm paying for it and giving it to the city, and I want to pay for it, build it once. I don't want to, I'm not standing here asking y'all to pay for it. I'm not asking for impact credits. So it's a way of hedging and protecting myself when I'm building a city asset and turning it over. Again, I don't get the value. The reason I'm willing to do that is because I know the value it will bring me, but it only brings it to me if I do it before I sell the majority of my homes. So I would tell you we're co-aligned and when that trail should exist, but I have to build myself in some protection for it.
And that's why I said, if we put the Alpha Loop on the perimeter and ran it along adjacent to Morrison and Haynes Bridge, we wouldn't have a crane sitting on Morrison or Haynes Bridge to put a truss on. And so, yeah, we could build it at that time. But because it's going through the middle of our development, we've got to put trusses on and utilities and work underneath the power lines. It creates a complicating factor.
And I'll tell you, having sections, I would doubt the city's going to accept a quick claim to the area or an easement, I think is what we decided, giving over an easement and maintenance agreement to the city when it's complete. You're not going to take it in chunks and phases. So that's yet another incentive for me to get the entire thing complete. So frankly, I can turn it over to you and it becomes y'all's issue going forward.
Councilman Heitz?
Gentlemen, did you bring a elevation of the commercial building A, looking at it from the interior? It's not in this group, and it wasn't in when we had a chance to talk previously, but we did bring up the discussion about an elevation looking at it from where you would actually enter some of those storefronts.
No, and that has not been fully designed yet. We don't have any interior elevations of the building. These are the only ones we currently have. But I remember the discussion around signage and both roof and wall signs. And, you know, it's something to go back to. I have no problem striking the condition from this, in large part because if you look, one, we're using gabled roofs, so there won't be roof signage. And two, it's primarily glass elevations all the way around four sides. So we won't want wall signage either. I like the idea of you walk up and you have kind of stationary sign banks, if you will, cordon steel. Somebody mentioned West Side Revisions, and that's very much similar to what we would be looking for.
Thank you. Second question is, your application speaks of two phases, Phase 1 and Phase 2. It speaks of the commercial building being commercial building A being included in Phase 1. So my question is there a time frame that you all have committed to in this mixed-use development to commence Phase 2 after completion of Phase 1? And I'll, just to tell you where I'm going with this, could there be a 5-year gap? Not that there will be, could there be?
Oh, absolutely. And I would venture to say, you won't love this, but it could be longer than that. You know, this was turned in, Phase 1 is on the screen now. And what I want to point out is Building A is something I want to go out, and doesn't matter how I figure it out. We have to build it spec, we'll build it spec. We want that building there. We know we can fill it, and we want to be very intentional with the users that we allow in the space. I don't want any national brands. And we want a very specific type of user. So we're soliciting some of them now and working through with people. But to that point, Building A will be the majority of our focus. In the interim, we will do all the infrastructure, but we want to basically use active green spaces and temporary activations while we work with additional users. So I don't want to just let a Longhorn's Steakhouse or an Outback come in and do a restaurant. I want, you know, somebody like an Orange Beast that has a little more flavor and character. So it'll leave us time to find those right people and build it out accordingly. The temporary uses, I got to flip one time here. The temporary uses doesn't mean flagpoles and tents or carnival setup. What you see on the screen now, where it says courtyard, that's about $1 million facility built primarily out of shipping containers and picnic tables and stuff in San Diego that some of our friends did, the Co-Place fellows. What you're looking at there actually has a hamburger restaurant, a coffee shop, a beer garden, a sound stage. I've sat there with numerous senators, and they hold outdoor gatherings, things like that. Conferences, we've done some finance conferences at that location, and it's a very cool kind of has the sexy atmosphere and appeal to it. They use one of the containers that you're seeing on the screen is all cold storage that all the users share. There's an efficiency to it. My favorite part about it, though, is that it's not wasted temporary use. For my part, we can build it, set it up, leave it 5 years, load it up on 4 or 5 tractor trailers, and move it to the next location a couple years later and reassemble it. So it never goes to waste. Some of the other ideas that would go on there would be maybe some pop-up farmers markets or community retail, things like that. So we do want to actively use the spaces throughout it, the entire commercial area, but build the permanent structures, you know, as we find the right users. And
Okay. So I see in the application 41,900 square feet of commercial space, and that's everything, that's complete.
that's 100%.
And Building A is 19,200 of that. So it's about 20, little less than half, 21,000. But if I'm hearing you, after Phase 1 is complete, it may be 5 years, it may be 10 years. You don't have a time frame as to, and we're rezoning this to mixed use, which has a commercial component and has some guidelines to it. But you're going to completely demobilize your construction crew and leave, and you can't articulate when you're coming back.
I'd say that's fair. It could be 1 year, it could be 5. I believe that for a permanent use, the temporary uses will happen, you know, as soon as we can get them out. But my belief is for a permanent building that's going to be there 50 to 100 years, it's worth the wait to find the right person and build it once and not end up with kind of a rushed plan. I could absolutely go build a 5,000 square foot restaurant today, and like I said, that's how you end up with Longhorns. I don't want them.
Well, if it's 24 acres and a 19,000 square foot commercial building, and the rest of it's residential, I mean, do you think that's a mixed-use product?
Yes, sir, I do.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions from council? Thank you, sir.
Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Didn't see you. Raise your hand. Councilwoman Richard.
Just I think this will be a quick one. Condition 22, the pedestrian crossings on Haynes Bridge. Site plan did not identify the width of the rainwater pedestrian crossing, so I just want to make sure you're comfortable with staff's recommendation of 12-foot.
We are.
Thank you.
I think it wasn't identified because that's, the other crossing is the Alpha Loop, so it had a specific, different requirement, so it was catching that issue.
Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell.
Okay, and just for a matter of public record, the sign package, you are okay with that and limiting the roof to maybe one sign, you would be okay with that?
Yeah.
And also the screening of the air conditioning units for the other units, you're okay with the two attachments that we've added and the one that you've had, and then you can decide design-wise on the combination?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Binder.
So, phase one, it could be there 1 year, 5 year, 10 years, waiting, while that kind of green space is there, who's taking care of that? Is that the commercial side, or is that?
We'll have a master association, and the master association will do a couple things. One, to the signage point, they'll have design guidelines. So, and that gets submitted before LDP. Those design guidelines would travel indefinitely with the project. Beneath the master association, there'd be a commercial association just for their area, and then a homeowners association. There's also some subs of the homeowners for the townhome product. All of that bundles up to cost-sharing agreements and happens through the master. So the master association will require maintenance of landscape, taking care of things like that, and then they'll build down chain from there.
And you all feel comfortable making that look, so phase one looking at like this, so it's not kind of a construction and waiting project?
Absolutely. I mean, again, it goes back to I can't sell homes if it looks like a wasteland. I like the comment staff put in that if a certain amount of time elapses, I have to restore a 100-foot buffer off of Haynes Bridge. It has to be planted. You know, to me, that I can tell you with dead certainty that if that happens, I'll be in going, well, I don't want to just plant trees and block the whole thing. Here's what we've come up with. And, you know, there will probably be some type of greater use. If you look up the works down off Chattahoochee Boulevard, they took a little green space area and did what they call the camp, which is kind of a low-impact playground use and amphitheater. Those will be the types of things my head goes to if we struggle with users and getting it all built.
Yeah. I hope, yeah, I ask these questions, I trust your intent. I just know when it gets a little bit gray area here, it's just nice to know what everybody's perceptions are and how.
And as a lawyer, let me just say, you know, sometimes I hate when clients talk. And I say that half joking, but half serious in that, you know, anyone that gets up here and says, I guarantee you this commercial is going to be built in X time, wasn't around in the 2008 crash. And so he's being honest when he says, you know, if he gave you a tight, like, yeah, I guarantee this is going to happen, then he's not being totally upfront. He's being totally upfront and honest to say, you know, it's going to be built. But to your point, Councilman Hypes, it's the infrastructure and everything will be all done at the beginning. So it will be just activated when the market builds those other buildings to it. And until that time, it will be actively used as part of the master multi-use development.
Any other questions from council for the applicant? Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Ms. Cobb, do we have any public comment cards on this item?
We do not, sir.
But if there's anyone here that would like to come forward and speak on the mixed development application, now's your opportunity. Seeing no one, we'll close public comment. Mr. Woodman? Councilman Hypes, you have the floor.
Mr. Woodman, I'm pretty far down the line in a thought, but I really don't know how to wrap it up in my head. Mixed use, is there a percentage component of residential to commercial as part of the definition?
Yes, it's 50% residential, 25% office was in 10% retail, 10% public space.
Is that based off square footage, or how do you measure that?
It can be either vertical or horizontal mix of uses, so we provide an opportunity to calculate it either way.
If you take out 21,000 square feet of the commercial, what do we have in terms of whether this is a mixed use or not?
The way the commercial is laid out on this site, I would think that I would need to look at the area compared to the remainder of the site. So I don't know that it would be, since it's not really a vertical mix of uses, it's more of a horizontal mix of uses. So I'd need to know what the area of the commercial is compared to the balance of the property. The commercial is such a small component within the mixed use that we reduced that from 25% to 10% a few years ago, just because we do have a lot of retail use throughout the city along our corridors. I believe they would probably.
The application says 41,000, but I think the reality is 19,000. So is the request for zoning and/or the variance reflecting 41,000, or is it reflecting the reality of 19,000? Because we now have an answer that we're going to build 19,000 square feet of a commercial building A as part of phase one, and we have a very honest, candid answer. We don't know if we're going to build phase two. We don't know when that's going to happen.
Sure.
So
the application that's before us is for 41,800 square feet of commercial development within the site. And they've indicated that they met that minimum 10% for commercial within the MU.
based off of 41,000.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Mr. Woodman, if I could follow up on that, could you repeat what you said composes mixed use? The components, because I thought you mentioned public space qualifying in MU. So could you go back through that statement you made a minute ago?
Sure. So I believe and I don't have the code right in front of me, but off the top of my head, I believe the residential component was a minimum 50%, office 25%, retail 10%, and public space in MU is minimum 10%. Public space or open space.
Thank you for clarifying. So if I'm understanding right, if that commercial portion in phase 2 or phase B, whatever you want to call it, how many square feet is that?
In the overall commercial or just the first phase commercial?
I'm talking about the phase that will not be built or is not committed to be built immediately.
Math comes out about 21,000 in round numbers. 21,000 square feet, not built, 19,000 built for a total of 41.
Right, and my point is I'm trying to get to, okay, so if the commercial for that 21,000 isn't built, but it becomes public space as is demonstrated in that exhibit, what does that total make between the public space and the commercial that's committed to being built in the first phase?
I don't know the area off the top of my head. Let me see if we have any reference to it on the plan.
And the only reason I bring, and maybe the applicant could clarify, the reason I'm bringing that up is I certainly understand the concerns of not having the commercial built. But if I see it being built, used until that is built as public space, that's an additional 20,000 square feet of public space along the Alpha Loop, then I might be a little more amenable to understanding that part.
It is 20,000 because they're one-story buildings, so it would just be using the same floor plate that hadn't been built. It would be 20,000 or 21,000 roughly. I do want to point out there's another 180,000 square feet total of civic and amenity space, and all of our amenity green spaces, 100% of them are open to the public. None of them will be gated or closed off. There's around 180,000 feet in addition to that of public green space.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Any other questions from council at this time? His question to me was, does that mean it meets the definition? And I would say that technically, I believe if it's zoned commercial and they're trying to, I don't believe they're going to leave it green any longer than they have to, that it qualifies just by being zoned as commercial with the intent to build on it as part of the MU. But I was just, because I share your concerns that it may be longer than I would like, I'm weighing the factor that if it's an additional 20,000 square feet of what I saw with green space along Haynes Bridge and the Alpha Loop and things like that, that would weigh against my concerns about it not being developed, because that 2008 does happen, but 2012 followed shortly thereafter. So that's just my thought process, and I'm thinking out loud in response to your question, Councilman.
If it's okay, can I just quickly add something to that?
You might as well.
Thank you. In looking at a mixed-use development, this is also needs to be looked at in the context in that, if you brought in TPA's project to the south and it came in at one time as one big mixed use, you look at it totally differently. So this is, yes, this piece right now is coming in for MU, but you have to look at the 2.5 million in office that's across the street and how that all counts towards the entire area as being a mixed use. Not just, you don't have each little piece mixed use and each one qualifies by itself. You have to look at what other side might be way over on the office and how that relates to this. And again, that's where I start out. This is a transition piece. You're transitioning from that office and to the lower intensity to the north. And so that's what I think makes this residential component very, very appropriate.
Thanks, sir. Any other questions from council at this time? All right, seeing none, I'll call for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will offer a motion to approve Z-21-05/V-21-13, the mix Morrison Park, as the conditions as read by Mr. Woodman, with the exceptions to the conditions that I'm going to outline as follows. Condition number 4B, the last change to the last sentence in that condition, if construction does not commence within 18 months from the start of the issuance of LDP. Condition number 14, changing back from staff to DRB on condition number 14. Condition number 17, in the, with accepting the applicant's conditions, in lieu of tree save, the applicant will install 2 oversized statement trees, adding minimum caliper of 6 inches within the development. Condition number 21, changing from staff back to DRB and then deleting the HVAC equipment. We'll cover that in another condition. Condition number 22, in the last sentence, pedestrian crossings shall be consistent with the North Point Creative Placemaking Plan, rainwater and Haynes Bridge pedestrian crossing shall be 12 feet in width with final approval by staff. Condition number 25, accepting the applicant's additional information there in the last sentence, the budget for the described sculptures and artwork shall not exceed $100,000, period. Condition number 29, accept the applicant's additions here. Provide detailed street planning for Haynesbridge Road, Morrison Parkway, and new private streets. Landscape plan for commercial areas shall be approved by DRB, and for the residential areas shall be approved by DRB as well, prior to submission of an LDP.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Yes. Provide detailed street planning for Haynesbridge Road, Morrison Parkway, and new private streets, period. Landscape for commercial areas shall be approved by DRB. Landscape for residential areas should be approved by DRB, period, prior to submission of an LDP. And condition number 41, the developer shall shield AC units behind the townhomes using a combination of fencing and landscaping as shown in Exhibit A and Staff Exhibit A. And that will be the end of my motion.
I'll second that with a friendly amendment for section 30. On that last sentence on the first page of 30. So it says, the alpha loop shall, where we go? The alpha loop shall be completed by the developer, and the trail shall be completed no later than 2 years after the issuance of the LDP. And let me redo that again. Should read, the alpha loop shall be completed by the developer, and the trail shall be completed no later than 2 years after the issuance of the LDP. Period. Construction shall be completed prior to the 50th CO. Line 39, item 39, it shall be replaced with development sign package shall be submitted with final approval by DRB. That's the end of the friendly amendment.
I'll accept those, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, by substitute, I would like to offer a motion to approve Z-21-05-V-21-3, the mix/Morrison Park, with the, to throw out the, to revert back to the previous condition for 3 years on number 30.
Second.
And I will also add the changes to Jason's plan for 39 with the sign package.
So let me clarify, you're not making a motion with any of the changes that Councilwoman Richard had added?
I am making all of them.
Okay, so you did a substitute motion, and it was all of the conditions as read by Councilwoman Richard, and changing
Jason's friendly amendment on 30 back to what the applicant had asked for, and keeping his conditions that Jason had made with number 39.
Okay. So we have a substitute motion by Councilman Burnett and second by Councilman Merkel. Are we all clear on those conditions?
Actually, I have a question to Councilmember Burnett's substitute motion. You changed it from 2 years to 3 years. Did you keep issuance of LDP?
Yes. And I want to clarify why. I totally agreed with the sentiment there until they made the argument about the overhead power lines. And I don't think you can ask them to do all of those things at one time. I would be very supportive of that if you didn't have the easements with respect to Georgia Power and the power company, because you have to treat those differently and what you can put under there and what you can keep under there, I don't think that I don't think that it's the right thing to do for them. And the truth is that it's going to take that long to do all those things anyway, and those power lines aren't going anywhere.
Councilman Binder.
Comments? Is that all right? Just,
Well, first, I just want to make sure we were clear on the conditions. So
I am clear with what Councilmember Burnett presented, yes.
So we are clear on the motion.
Yes, as clear as I can get with Councilmember Burnett's.
I just wanted to make sure we had gotten to that point. Now, any comments, Councilman Binder?
I hear the concern on your side. I believe you also made a great point too about how things can get based on what we write down today and agree to today, and then 2 years come, and then we're saying, well, that's not what I meant when I write that, or this is how I analyzed it. I'd feel more comfortable taking some time now. We've got a lot coming at us within this past week, and when we were discussing earlier last week, it was like, well, we delay to make sure it's right. So what I would like to offer is a tabling of this for no time duration, and come back when you can have a clear-cut answer on that item of 30. So I'd like to make a motion to table.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to table. There can be no discussion. All those in favor of the motion to table this indefinitely, please vote yes. Otherwise, vote no. And the motion fails, 5-2. So we'll go back to the original motion that has a second. Any discussion? Councilman Burnett.
To Councilmember Binder's point, I was for it before I was against it. And I do, they won me over, and I don't want to, they're not, you're fair, but it's an imperfect world. Thank you.
Councilman Hypes.
I think this is a very interesting and thoughtful project, well placed by 360 Tech Village and the surrounding area. And if and when it gets built, I will admire it and ride my bike or go walking the Alpha Loop through that development. I've always tried to hold myself to a standard that variances are at one level and then zoning changes are another level and changes to the land use plan are yet another level. And for me, if I approve this as a 41,000 square foot commercial project but don't believe that that is actually what's going to happen and that it really doesn't meet this type of a zoning change, then I feel like I won't be treating the next applicant who comes along, and maybe I don't like the look of their project as much, and then I hold them to a more strict standard, which is what I think the mixed-use standard is. I think when an applicant tells us what they're going to do, we should believe them. And it says right here in the agenda, and it was something that I had been struggling with prior to the start of this meeting tonight, where it says commercial buildings shall be 2 stories and shall be constructed in the first phase of the development with the residential uses, and that's referring to commercial building A. So you're telling us as a condition you're going to build A in the first phase, and I think we should believe you when you tell us that. And then what it goes on to say is, as to the other commercial areas, the only obligation that you have whatsoever is to plant grass and landscape it, and then turn it over to an HOA. So if it passes, I'll be very happy for you, and I'll enjoy it. but in terms of being true to myself and the residents of my city, I don't believe this zoning change is merited. So this is one of the toughest decisions I've had sitting up here. I wish you were asking for a zoning that was appropriate, but this does not seem appropriate to me. So.
Councilman Milker.
Yeah, so we've been doing this for as long as I've been up here, 5.5 going into 6 years. And the city's done an amazing job, city staff primarily, with partnering with these different developers. And as Adam mentioned when he was up here, you know, he's pulling out of his own pocket, his own money to build this park feature for the city, this connection of the loop that he is not required to by law. And even if he did, he would have an argument to say, I'm going to put it along Haynes Bridge and along Morrison Parkway. It's just going to be a big sidewalk, and y'all are going to walk next to all these citizens. Instead of doing that, and I don't have anything in the game with this other than it being a good part of the city, he has agreed through help with the staff to run it right through the middle of his development. And he has expressed, which I didn't find out until he explained it to me in our last meeting, the stipulations with Georgia Power that he just can't run around in there and do whatever he wants. He has serious restrictions. And to put in hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of trail system in there and then know that he's got to run a D9 across it because it's the only way he can get out of the power lines, he just tore up a piece. Like he said, I'm going to build it once and give it to you. This is a gift to the city. And I don't understand putting time ramifications on a project that's going to take 3 years to build all the residential anyways. Like he said, the first year alone is nothing but getting stumps out of there, grading, infrastructure, et cetera. So it's really in a 2-year plan. So I don't think it's right to second guess the engineering. I don't think it's right to second guess the timing and insist on something being put in a time frame just because you like that number. I don't. I'm not worried about that not getting finished. This is a tough piece of property. I've seen 3 renditions and they all included apartments up to this point. So I commend you for the amount of time and effort and money that's already been put into this. I'm willing to take a little chance on a tough piece of property. If it does drag out, if those 2 phase 2 commercial buildings, he's not going to turn it to grass and hand it to the HOA. I mean, that's just silly. He's not going to. He's going to keep it. He's going to maintain it so that when 2012 comes around, then the buildings go in. It's not a business sense to turn it into grass and say kids can play soccer on it. Maybe they can, but he's not going to turn it over. So with that point, I commend him, and I think Councilman Richards done a lot of work on this, and I appreciate what she's done and the input she's given back to me. I think I met with these guys 6 months ago. I think it was December, maybe the first time, and I know it's been going on for a year. I think this is an excellent project with the right people, and we've seen not the right people come before us for it before. So I'm very much in support of this.
Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell.
Thank you. I very much agree with what Councilmember Merkel just said. I've been doing this for 10 years, and I've got to be, I tell you what, Adam, you and your team, you came with complete honesty. You didn't hide anything. It's so rare because I'm so used to dealing with snake oil salesmen who call themselves developers. And we've had our share of those in 10 years, have we not? You were honest. You presented the obstacles. You presented every problem. You didn't try to skirt around it. And I can't tell you how refreshing that is. Given that, we've also looked at Tech 400, and that was a grassy plain, and in the future they were going to build there, and we knew, and now that's finally coming about. Unlike Avalon, where the recession hit, and our city was looking at a hole in the ground, and we could not condition it enough until the new developer came along. We do have conditions where, until this gets built, you have to put landscaping and you have to put a grassy plain. So there are conditions that protect this property that we may or may not approve tonight. I'm certainly going to vote to approve it. There's not an uglier site in the city, and Mr. Morrison didn't do us a great favor by leaving the site like he did. But not since the hole at Avalon have we looked at something that was so distressing in our city, and our citizens are not used to seeing that. And the thing that I love most about it is there's not one rental property on this entire mixed-use development. That says a lot. All of those are for sale units, and I look forward. I wish you the best as we move forward, and we'll see how it goes.
Any other comments? I'll just say that I do appreciate the time you've put in with our staff in making it. It certainly is, of the plans we've reviewed over the past year or so, the best of those. I am supportive of this. It's a tough site, and it looks terrible. And right now, it's just a lot of runoff, and there's nothing we could do about that because they had a timber easement, and that's okay. But I'm not making my decision based on that. I think we're talking about what could or would happen. Nobody wants that parcel to go undeveloped. And I don't think the people that are building this project intend to let it go undeveloped. I think they want to maximize their return on investment, and they're proposing to do that by building a quality development in a terrific location. And the market does dictate. I do give you credit because you're acknowledging the fact that the market will determine when those sell. Right now, the market is extremely hot, and if you were ready to break ground tomorrow and build those units, I have no doubt that that project would be completed in 2 years. But the fact is, it's acres of stumps, and it's going to take some serious work to do that. So we're looking at 2 or 3 years down the road. I understand the concerns my fellow council members make, but I think I would fear what would happen with this site more if we don't have something of this quality zoned on this parcel. Because as was alluded to earlier, the ones I've seen before were not something I thought we would want for our community. And I think this is a healthy mixing of product for sale by owner product. And it hits some price points that we're struggling for in this city. So that's why I support it. That being said, if there's no other comments, all those in favor of the motion, please vote yes. Otherwise, vote no. And the motion does pass. Congratulations. So that will wrap up that portion of the public hearing. You may be glad to know that that's probably the longest part of the public hearing. I expect Director Harris to be a little more brief. And that will be the second item, which is the public hearing on the fiscal year 2022 millage rate levy.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is the third of 3 public hearings on the proposed millage rate for fiscal year 2022. And with that, there's no vote under this item, but in a few minutes, we will have the ordinance itself, but it's open for public comment.
Thanks, sir. Mr. Thomas, we don't have to do any reading in this portion.
Not this portion, that's correct.
Just wanted to make sure. Ms. Cobb, do we have any public comment cards on this item?
We do not, sir.
But if anyone would like to come forward and speak on the 2022 millage rate levy and the fiscal year 2022, please come forward at this time. Seeing no one, we'll close public comment. Any discussion by council? All right, sir. That'll wrap up the public hearing. Thank you, Director. We'll move on to old business. And the only item under old business this evening is the approval of the fiscal year 2022 millage rate levy. This is the second reading, so there's no public comment. Director Harris.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. You said that correctly. Second ordinance, second reading of the ordinance for the adoption of the millage rates. And with that, Sam could.
And there have been no changes since
No
the
changes,
first reading.
nothing else, right?
Thanks, sir. Mr. Thomas.
an ordinance of the mayor and council of the city of Alpharetta, Georgia, to fix the ad valorem tax rate of the city of Alpharetta, Georgia for the fiscal year commencing July 1, 2021 and ending June 30, 2022, and for other purposes.
Thanks, sir. Any questions from council? Questions?
No question.
All right, sir. Seeing no questions, do we have a motion from council?
Yes, sir. I move that we approve the ordinance as read by City Attorney Sam Thomas.
We have a motion by Councilman Binder and a second by Councilwoman Richard, and that was the approval of the fiscal year 2022 millage rate levy as read by City Attorney Sam Thomas. Any discussion? Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell.
Thank you. This is good news for the city in the sense, I know that there will be appeals made and stuff like that, but I would strongly like to make the recommendation that we consider, I know that we have a grant out for the police officers, the positions that aren't yet filled, but should that grant, that would be ideal if we can get that, but should that not go through, I would love for we as a council to consider filling the 2 positions. I believe it's, Tom, it's 160,000 roughly for the positions and their benefits, so that we can fill those 2 police roles. Thank you.
Any other comments? All those in favor of the motion, please vote yes. Otherwise, vote accordingly. And Councilman Hypes has stepped out of the room. He may be able to beat you. He's on his way in. Councilman Hypes.
Trying to run for taxes?
The motion was to approve the motion was to approve the 2022 millage rate levy in the ordinance as read by Sam Thomas. If you'd have just been 30 seconds slower, we'd have just taken the vote without you. But now you must cast one. And it does pass unanimously. All right, we'll move on to the new business portion of tonight's agenda now. And first item up is contract renewal with Peachtree Government Relations. Mr. Regas.
Mayor and Council, in your packet is a letter from Don Bolya, the president of Peachtree Government Relations, to enter a request to extend their contract beginning in July through next June. They consult with us. They cover our concerns at the Capitol during the legislative session. They also facilitate meetings for us with state people when we need that, and they do that. They've been helpful with TAD, tax allocation district negotiations with the county, and also with the school board in the future if that happens. And so that's before you tonight. We do recommend that you extend their contract. It's for $3,000 a month. I'll take any questions.
Councilman Binder.
One event that I think was pretty good was my right before we were sworn in. I think Mayor Belle organized, or there was an organization of the local delegation previous, and we've done it maybe one other time. I would love to see if they could facilitate that coming up this fall, of what's to be expected. I know some of our local delegates, they're real responsive when things happen, but would like to know maybe things that are in the hopper that they haven't told us yet. Just a lot of things going on with transportation and some other things that maybe are statewide, but our residents would be interested in. So that would be great.
We'll do that.
Any other questions from council? Thanks, sir. Ms. Cobb, do we have any public comment cards on this item?
We do not, sir.
But if anyone would like to come forward and speak on this matter, now's your chance. Seeing no one, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a motion to approve the contract renewal with Peachtree Government Relations in an amount not to exceed $36,000 and authorize the mayor to execute all necessary documents.
Have a motion by Councilman Burnett, second by Councilman Merkel, and that was to approve the contract with Peachtree Government Relations in an amount not to exceed $36,000. Any discussion? Councilman Burnett.
I just wanted, one of my favorite memories with our government relations person, I'm not running for re-election, so I'll say it, he's a lobbyist, was with Tom Harris over the, when the state was looking to defund this last year. They were trying to cut into the city's right-of-way fees to charge GDOT rates. And between the three of us and John Albers, we killed a bill that made a lot of people in South Georgia very angry and would have taken a lot of money away from every city. So I am grateful, even if it was only 50 grand right there, with all the things that we have working with GDOT, it is really nice to have somebody who has those relationships, because we couldn't possibly have them all. Thank you.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please vote yes. Otherwise, vote no. It does pass unanimously. Next item up under new business, and the final item up under new business, will be the downtown Alpharetta Christmas tree.
Yes, Mayor, Council. Also in your packet is a letter from R.T. Evans with Evans General Contractors, where they are willing to donate $60,000 toward the purchase of a 42-foot Christmas tree with an 8-foot star on top to be placed on the town center green. The conditions that they are willing to donate that money to the city are in the body of the letter. They want us to take good care of the tree. They want us to display it each Christmas season. Morgan and others think it'll last at least 10 years. The city will pay to erect it, take it back down, and then store it every year. And they would, they would also like a sign be prominently displayed during the Christmas season that says this Christmas tree was donated by the Evans General Contractors. So,
any questions from council? Thanks, sir. Ms. Cobb, do we have any public comment cards?
We do not, sir.
But if anyone would like to come forward and speak on this item, now's your chance. Seeing no one, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a recommendation that we approve the donation of $60,000 towards the purchase of a 42-foot Christmas tree with an 8-foot star on top from Evans General Contractors, and authorize the mayor to execute all necessary documents. The total cost of the tree is $67,182.13. The additional $7,182.13 is funded through the holiday decorations account.
Second.
I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell and a second by Councilman Burnett. And that was to approve the acceptance of the donation of the downtown Alpharetta Christmas tree, with the city picking up the tab for the installation. Any discussion?
I would like,
Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to say thank you to Ray Evans and Evans Contracting and RT. They were absolutely phenomenal, and I'd like to thank Ben Burnett. I said we need help raising funds so we can get some private funds. We haven't been able to get it in the budget each year, and that's probably for the better. But you stepped up to the plate and made through your connection there. And also the Jackson family was just as willing to donate, and as always, they are very generous with the city. So This will move the tree over to where the fountain is now, so more people will be able to gather around the tree in all angles. And I believe Oregon and his team are moving the nutcrackers to the part where the tree was, so that there can be some synergy on both sides of downtown. But you can speak to that when you get to that point. But just thankful for the Evans and what they did.
Any other discussion? Councilman Burnett?
And I would like to thank the pro tem. When you'd asked last year in the budget cycle to try to raise private funds, there's nothing more that I enjoy about public service than asking people for money. And I think that having the opportunity to have a local business that does work all over the world, to just make it easy. They're as humble a people as you could ever hope to meet. And if you're going to, have people like that in your city, and who knows how many there are, just giving people the opportunity to say yes and put a little bit back, into the business community so that we can do things the way we want to see it done, I think there's tremendous value in that. And I thank you for the opportunity.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please vote yes, otherwise vote accordingly. And it does pass unanimously. So that'll wrap up the new business portion of tonight's meeting, and we'll move on to the workshop. And the workshop is the citywide housing analysis. Ms. Cook?
Yes, I was just going to put the date up there. Mayor and Council, we've been working on the comprehensive land use plan update since July of last year. And I just want to take a minute before Jeff comes up to speak and go over the timeline. Of course, we had the kickoff meeting of July of last year. We had the first public meeting October of last year, online surveys. We've had this couple of steering committee meetings. And so the meetings that we'll have that are coming up is the next one would be the steering committee meeting August the 31st. And then Michael sent out the survey results from the last couple public meetings to you. I think he sent those today. And we've had a little bit over 1,100 participants so far. We're really excited about the feedback that we're getting from the public. And I think that during COVID, more people were willing to take surveys, so we took advantage of that. And then we also had the mapping exercise, so really happy about the results that we're getting. So we'll have the steering committee meeting on August 31st, and then we'll take this to the Planning Commission, the draft, September 2nd, and then it will come to City Council on September 20th. And both of those are still considered public meetings to get public input for those for the comprehensive land use plan. And then, of course, we have to adopt the plan and then get it to the state for review. So that is our timeline. One of the elements that's required is the housing element. We're required to do that as part of the process, and that's to evaluate adequacy and suitability of existing housing stock to serve the current and future community needs. So we did contract with Jeff Koski to come forward and present the citywide housing analysis. And if Jeff can come forward, you're going to use this here? Okay, all right. There we go.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Appreciate it. The opportunity to be here. It's always a pleasure to see you. And yeah, we got to work on this housing analysis. As Kathy said, we were getting it ready to be, or we were preparing it to be ready for July of 2020. So we started in kind of early-ish 2020. So that is interesting time to be doing a housing study. We didn't really know where things were headed. in early 2020 and thought that the housing market, who knows where the housing market was headed. So as we put this together, we were keeping a close eye on it, and as we finished it and we talked through it with a few of you, and we were really keeping a close eye on it and making sure that, this thing didn't go out of date like, the minute that it got put into the plan. And so if you go into the plan itself and look at the summary, the executive summary and the points that we had pulled out of the research that we did, all of those points are still true to this day. And so it's kind of interesting that we hear so much about how COVID has changed so much in the world and what it's really done in housing. And again, in housing, I think I hear a lot of reports talking about it, how, the world's so different in housing now than it was. And it is different. The world's always changing. But the trends that we identified when we finished this report in, somewhere around July 2020, those trends, not a single one has really changed. In fact, they've accelerated, right? So the trends that we identified back, about a year ago, COVID, you would have thought COVID might have upset the apple cart and you threw up on it and you said, go try again, Jeff. But that's not really what happened. The trends really accelerated. And so we're still confident. We think this is a good snapshot in time to look at the housing market at really kind of the beginning of COVID is really what this is, or kind of maybe in the middle. But it's still relevant. The trends that we're identifying are still there. The price points have gone up, but the trends are still there. The other thing I want to point out real quick is when you hired us, we were called Blakely Advisory Group. If you've known us as Blakely Advisory Group. In a couple months ago, we changed our name. Same people doing the same things, just a different name. So tonight I'll talk about just a little bit, and I know it's getting late, so don't want to talk necessarily longer than we need to. But all of this is, tonight is really kind of a highlight reel of what's in the overall document, the overall housing analysis. And so this is covered in detail in the housing analysis, and tonight, kind of just hitting the highlights. So we're looking at national and regional trends. We look at local housing demand drivers, and you can read that as another way as demographics, basically, and employment. So demographics, employment are what drives housing demand. Then we took a look at peer cities for comparison, just to kind of put Alpharetta in context with some of your neighbors and other relevant places around the region. And then we looked at supply. And then we took a look also kind of at this idea of affordability when it comes to housing. As we know, prices are continuing to go up, and so there's this metric called cost burden that we want to look at. So we've got about 10 slides just to kind of summarize what's in the plan itself, and again, just kind of hitting the highlights. There's a lot going on here, but this is really kind of focusing on national and regional trends. And again, these trends are absolutely still in play and are continuing to accelerate. And really, it's, again, if you just kind of go around the wheel, it's not that there is no demand for large single-family homes, but there is a decreasing portion of the market that is looking for that big house on a big lot, even during COVID. And again, we heard a lot about everyone's escaping the city and wanting that big lot and that big house. It's just, that there are people who are looking for that, but the trends are driven largely by the demographics, and that gets you to the other side of the wheel, more smaller households. And this is a demographic trend that will continue for at least the next 2 decades, in that our household sizes in America and in Georgia and in the Atlanta region are shrinking. Our household sizes are down to almost 2 people per household. So we're not the nation of households that we were when we watched Leave It to Beaver or the Brady Bunch even back in the day. We have smaller households. 1 and 2 person households really prevail, and that's where the growth in the market is. And so that's another thing we're looking at, is not just who's in the market, but what's growing. So when we're thinking about where is the future demand going to go, and build towards that, right? The old saying of don't skate towards the hockey puck, skate towards where the hockey puck's going to be. And so where the hockey puck's going to be in housing is more smaller household housing that meets the demand for smaller households. That also gets us to this idea of rental ascending. And again, there's not to say that there's no demand for sale. Obviously, for sale, it will continue to be largely the majority of demand, but it's just that the rental market has grown over the past decade and seems to still be growing some. This is very obvious to you all here in Alpharetta, ground center of new walkable urban mixed use in the Atlanta region, and that is absolutely a trend that's continuing, as you all know. And then again, with these prices going up, the need for more attainable housing, workforce housing, affordable housing, whatever name you want to put on it, but housing that is affordable to the middle class is escaping us daily. And again, these are national trends, regional trends, and that have been really ascending over the past 3-4 years, if not more, and are continuing even here at the end of the pandemic. And this is really where I think we're going, continuing to head in the housing market. And so, again, over on the right, this is sort of our sermon that we give, and I won't get too much into it. I'll say this. If you were to give me a pen and say, draw me a community of houses to meet the demand, but they can only be for sale houses, it would look a heck of a lot like what you just approved. Like, to me, that is a community of development that checks a lot of boxes for where housing is going, particularly the mix of housing types. And the 14-foot townhomes will meet that demand for a smaller household, obviously, as an example, but that there's a mix and that there's walkability to commercial. Oops. So let's see. Sorry. The arrows. Here we go. All right. So just thinking about those topics that we're kind of, we're going to hit the highlights. Again, we're taking a 10,000-foot view here of the housing market in Alpharetta. And so, one of the things we think about is where we've been, where we're going, and looking at the growth rate. And obviously, you all are growing fast, and trying to put that in context, you're growing faster than the region overall, just slightly, or have grown just slightly slower than Fulton County overall. But again, that takes you through 2020. As we're going forward, you all are obviously going to continue to grow. So that's really the baseline of housing demand, right? It takes people, it takes households to create housing demand. And so folks want to be here, therefore housing demand continues. And so this set of data really speaks to this idea of changing household sizes, right? And that if you again, in putting you in context with the county overall and the region overall, you can see that, while you have a proportion of smaller households that is smaller than the county or the region overall, still over half of your households today are 1- and 2-person households, right? So then we start looking at sort of the mix of what's on the ground, the supply. And so you all, and I think I've got this data in here, if not, it's in the full report, about 67% of your homes are single-family homes, right? And so there's a bit of a dichotomy between the households, the houses that are here, and the household sizes, just assuming that a small household may or may not want a single-family home into the future. And there certainly will be 1- and 2-person households that will always want a single-family home. But typically, a 1- and 2-person household, they're looking for an option. It could be a single-family home, could be a townhome type of situation. And so again, I think it speaks to this mix that is necessary to meet the new demand for housing. It takes a mix. And, on the for sale side, different housing types, both owner and rental. And again, just kind of part of the same story, Alpharetta, obviously it's a great place to raise a family. You've got a higher proportion of households with children here than in the region overall or Fulton County, but it's still less than half of your households have kids in them. Right, and so again, it's just this idea that there's no one-size-fits-all when it comes to housing, right? And if you want to have a community, and I'm not trying to say you, but just if there is a community that wants to sort of, meet the needs of all of its citizens that are here today as they turn over in households, and you're attracting new, it takes a mix, and it takes a mix that includes houses that are acceptable and preferable to households of all sizes. So that's kind of that piece of it, that mix of housing is important, we think, and you've got the demographics that would say, yeah, a housing mix is what we need here as well. In terms of what's on the ground supply, in terms of the occupied units, right now you're at about 2/3 of your units are owner occupied. And that, again, you can see fits in with the region overall. And as we've looked at this, and as you've gotten more apartments here in Alpharetta over the past, decade than you did the decade before, the owner occupied has kept up. And so you're trending pretty flat in terms of that distribution. And that's okay. I mean, I think it seems like you've kind of continued with the supply that you've had is in terms of renter versus owner. The ratio has stayed relatively stable. So that's, again, just kind of hitting some highlights on the supply and demand, thinking about your peer comparison set. There's a lot more data in the report itself, but we compared you all to Roswell and Johns Creek, obviously your immediate neighbors, took a look at Marietta and Peachtree City as well as more, a more affluent city on the south side, just to see. We didn't include Peachtree City because we want to kind of boil it down to just your immediate neighbors, just for tonight. And the big thing, and again, these are things that you all may know, but it's good for a comprehensive plan to, put the marker in the ground to say, every 10 years we're going to take stock of where we are. And of course, Alpharetta, it far exceeds your neighbors in the number of jobs. And so again, this is another thing as we talk about housing demand drivers, jobs in the local area clearly create housing demand. And that's, people ask me about the housing market. Will it continue? Is it a bubble? I said, don't look, if you want to know the future of the housing market, don't look at the housing stats, look at the employment stats. If you're creating jobs in the region, if you're creating jobs in your city, you are creating housing demand. You will continue to sell houses, rent houses, whatever it is. Jobs equal housing demand. And so obviously this is, you can see the outgrowth over the past 10 years. You all have added, 25,000 jobs. Roswell's added, less than 12,000. So you're clearly this job center, which is part of the reason why housing is in such demand here. And again, you can see largely the majority of new jobs have been earning 40,000 and above. But again, to that idea of a mix, 2/3 of the jobs you're creating are below $40,000 a year, right? And so at $40,000 a year, that doesn't buy you much house, particularly today. So that is something to be thinking about, just the fact that, there are a wide variety of jobs. Even when you're attracting an office building, a quarter of those jobs are going to be service workers, right? The people who are servicing that building, not just the professional jobs that are in there. And so those are jobs that are being counted in here that are driving to Alpharetta or taking transit in some way, living here some way or another, but they are present as well and have to have a place to live. But again, this the housing growth is impressive, the population growth is impressive, but this is kind of a planner's dream stat down here. You hear this a lot, jobs to housing. And so while you've added a lot of housing, you really haven't kept up. While you've added a lot of jobs, your housing really hasn't kept up at the same rate, right? So again, if you look all the way over on the right at the region, this feels about right. Maybe it ought to be a little bit lower, but ratio of new jobs to housing permits, 2.4. That's about where it's typical, right? But what this is saying is you're creating even more jobs than housing units. And so just by that metric, you could keep adding housing and there will be demand for it. Speaking of kind of the historical supply, now this is looking at permits. Now we know not every housing permit gets built, but it definitely gives us an idea of sort of the flow of when housing's coming, when we got the housing that we got, when did the housing market slow down. And again, you can see 2008, 2009, 2010, very little housing built, and then the housing market comes alive. And this is something that we've anywhere we go in Atlanta, it looks something like this, although you all have produced more housing in the past 10 years than a lot of places. But I always like to point out that while it feels like you've been adding a lot of housing, it's nothing compared to what you were adding in the 90s, right? And so in terms of the volume of new homes coming to Alpharetta, you're only about halfway to where you were in the 90s, which is kind of hard to fathom almost, to think about the new housing that is being produced in this region. And again, this is a region-wide thing. I could say the same thing about the region overall, that we're only producing about half as many homes today as we were producing in the 90s. And we were a region half the size, and you were a city about half the size. So yeah, we've actually slowed down housing production since the 90s, which is kind of, to me, a wild thing to think about considering how much housing's been added. This just speaks to the pricing of it, again, the supply side. And again, this idea that housing affordable to, basically housing affordable to households making $40,000 to $80,000 a year, $40,000 to $90,000 a year. If you want to buy a new house, it's basically not going to happen, right? So if you're not making six figures, if your household at least combined is not making six figures, you're out of the market for a new home, really anywhere regionally, but particularly here in Alpharetta. And so you can see that, you know, the lower price bands, the gray and the orange sort of disappear throughout, you know, when the housing market came back to life. And so now you're really having difficulties getting anything built, you know, and you all know this. I mean, you see the signs, you understand how it's working now, but basically really difficult to build anything valued under $500,000, if not $600,000 to $700,000 now for single family. So therefore you see the ascendance of townhomes, right? And so townhomes kind of had always played that value oriented product type. And you can see it again, that you see the big orange bars. So even all the way back in 2016, you could still get a brand new townhome in Alpharetta for about $300,000. That just is not even, you know, not even anywhere close to what's happening today. And so the townhome market is finding new places. It's finding itself almost as a luxury product in walkable areas, such as in Avalon, which makes a lot of sense. But it's because of all of the factors going on in home building, particularly pricing and labor issues, it's just hard to build anything more affordable today. And so, again, the market is here for the higher end single family, higher end townhomes, and that's great because, you know, those are homes that are in demand as well. But it's the sort of that disappearing mid-range price point that we're looking at as well. And so that gets us to this idea of cost burden. And so you can see really, so there's a couple things going on here. You've got renters and you've got owners. Renters up above, owners below. And if you the rule of thumb that we all have heard, 30% of your income, no more than 30% of your income should go towards housing, right? That's a rule of thumb that no one says it has to be that way. But if you take that metric in that only 30% of your household income should go towards your housing, if you're over that, you're considered cost burden. And this is something the Census Bureau made up, the cost burden metric. And so basically the idea that you're looking at here, really kind of you start at the bottom with the owners. There isn't really an issue in Alpharetta with cost burden on the ownership side. And you can see 60% of owners are paying less than 20% of their income on housing, right? So that actually says you could even start pushing prices even more potentially on the ownership side. And so that, you know, why, and what happens, right, is that it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. You know, you'd like to buy a home, can't afford it, right? You can only buy a home and you're restricted by the mortgage. The mortgage company tells you, well, you can't afford it, you're not going to get a mortgage, you can't buy it. So you don't see a ton of cost burden on the ownership side, but you do see it on the renter side because that's where you go, obviously, when you can't buy a home. And so you can see over here on the right, on the top chart, 40%, almost 40% of renters in Alpharetta are cost burden, right? And so that's not unique to Alpharetta, but it is an issue, right? And that there are people who live here and that are, you know, basically don't have the ability to spend money on the other essentials, right? So when you're taking away from your you know, your food budget, your transportation budget, you have to spend it on your housing.
I'm sorry, I thought you were just shuffling over there. Councilman Binder.
Do you have any numbers of how that compares to the Atlanta metro area?
I don't.
Are
have them off the top of
38%
my
and
head, but
18%?
I could get them, but it would be similar, somewhat similar. I would say the cost burden on the renter side is probably even more exacerbated. So yeah, I mean, I don't think that you're out of the norm when you compare it to the region overall or to your neighbors. We do have that data. I just don't have it off the top of my head here, but you know, comparatively speaking, you know, you're not out of the norm, but you know, you think about 40% is still a pretty significant portion of the population. And again, this gets back to that comments that I was making earlier about the jobs, and that while you can see that you know, 2/3 of your jobs are above 40,000 a year. You still have these, you know, 35,000 workers in Alpharetta who can't pay if they were a single person. Of course, you know, two income households are a thing, so let's not ignore that. But if they're as a single person, you're making 40,000 a year or less, you can't pay more than $1,000 in rent. You can't pay more than 125,000 in a purchase price, and so that's just very difficult. Again, difficult here, difficult everywhere now. But again, I think that there are a lot of positives to take from this. I mean, I think this idea of affordability, attainability in housing is important. Obviously, that impacts a lot of things. If people have to drive here to come to work, that clogs up your roads. You know, if the transit isn't a great option for them, they don't really have another option if they can't live here. And so that they, among other impacts, not having enough attainable housing does impact your traffic situation, because people have to be in their cars and they got to be on 400 and they got to be all over the place. So that's one reason to think about this. But again, I think that, you know, the housing market in and of itself, the attractiveness of Alpharetta can be seen in the housing market. There is high demand here. We expect demand to continue. You're getting great builders to show up to build really good projects that are actually starting to, quote unquote, combat some of the issues in that. And by those issues, I would say, you know, half-acre lots, single-family homes, if that's all you were getting, in which there are some communities that's all they see, you know, that's great. That's a market. It's not to say you shouldn't have homes on half-acre lots, but if that's all you were getting, you would only be meeting a sliver of the market. But by having, you know, these types of developments, other types of developments, walkable areas where you can have, you know, multifamily developments, that's what we're telling communities to do, and you guys are really kind of doing it. You know, that you've got places for multifamily, places for single family, places for a mix, and yeah, so that is commendable, I would say. Not that you need my affirmation of what you're doing, but as a guy that's looking at housing markets, as a guy that does these types of things and communities large and small throughout the state of Georgia, I would say there's very few communities that are getting the kind of housing mix that you all are getting. And obviously there are challenges, and I think affordability, attainability is a challenge that we all will continue to struggle with. But overall, I think the housing market's very impressive here, based on the fact that you're getting this wide variety and good mix of homes. And there you go. So, yeah, happy to answer any questions. I hope I didn't go too fast. I know it's kind
Any
of a
questions
lot to
from
have a lot of
council?
data thrown at you all at once, but.
No question. Councilman Binder.
Other data that you have available, going to those that are making less than 40,000, is there data available or way to pinpoint like a map of how far the average commute is, or the average min and max? Because that would be something that would be interesting to see.
Yeah. We have some commuting data I think we do in the overall report, but we can break it down even more.
Because I don't know how we can answer the issue here. It's an Atlanta metro area, but just to identify how long these people are going out. Another one is we have, like most other cities, we have office space that's above average unoccupied that we're not used to seeing. But one of the the things is housing. They talk about, I think Brandon Beach brings it up quite a bit of, used to be the CEO, lives next to the golf course. Now he's looking, okay, where do my employees want to live?
Right.
Can you quantify the different types of places? Like, so what kind of supply of different types? Like, townhomes, we've been building a lot of. The rentals, renters by choice, you're hearing that more. I mean, even, I'm hearing that maybe even some of our candidates might be renters by choice, so that's becoming more acceptable. But what type of housing markets are available based on economic development, economic demand for some of these employers that we want to move in here?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on what kind of jobs you're talking about, right? I mean, I think if you all have done a great job of attracting tech, but a lot of it has been sort of not so much the entry-level tech, but sort of the mid-level tech. And so, I mean, and then really, the answer is all about those incomes, right? And so, they are, even if they are renters by choice, the jobs that you are attracting through your economic development are looking, even if they are renters by choice, they want a higher end rental option. And so it could be a multifamily, it could be a townhome rental, it could be, I mean, the money is chased right now, the money is chasing build to rent product. And right now that's kind of fulfilling that gap for new homes at the lower end of the price band, but even still, I think that those are going to be attractive to a lot of potentially the renters by choice who don't want to live in a multifamily. But yeah, I mean, I guess I've kind of danced around your question. I know the answer is depends on the jobs and it depends on the income, what kind of housing that they want to look for.
And as we're doing the comp planning, like, so policies like we had tonight, like the 10% rental cap, is that something an employer would like to see as beneficial or not? Like, and that's just one example. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but just what are the employers looking for in the different types? And, you don't have to answer that tonight, just
Right.
kind of.
Yeah. I mean, it's worth thinking about it. And again, I think that, younger households, while okay, so first of all, millennials are not the young kids anymore, right? So the millennials are the first-time home buyers, basically, right? They are forming families finally, and they are moving out. And many of them are buying homes. The millennials are the number one generation in the housing market. However, they are having difficulties buying homes in ways that, I'm Gen X. I mean, if we want to go down the generational chain, but even at Gen X, it was much easier for me to buy my first house because I didn't have the student debt levels. It was before the recession, so the mortgage lending standards were much looser. And so, getting back to your question, Councilman Binder, I would think that, that if you are trying to attract millennials, which again are not the young kids anymore, they're the almost mid-career professionals at this point, I think you would want to leave a little wiggle room and not be so prescriptive, because where mid-professional households in the past were going to always be buying a house, that is absolutely not going to be the case today. That just isn't. And it's not a moral failure on them. It's just a financial reality that it's much more difficult to buy, particularly your first house now than it's been in maybe ever. Well, that's another, yeah, absolutely. So I didn't quite exactly answer your question, but I think it's a great question to be asking for sure, particularly in Alpharetta where you are creating lots of jobs. And want to do so, I think, continue.
Any other questions from council? Mr. Burnett, Councilman Burnett. Sure, it's a workshop.
I appreciate you being here. I think there are 5 things that sell Alpharetta. I think it's City Center. I think it's Avalon. I think it's Milton High School. I think it's Cambridge. And I think it's Alpharetta High School. And nothing is more important as you look than your job centers and your schools. And you could sell every house on the west side of Alpharetta today for $500,000, and it's doing just fine. And I grew up in Hawaii. There is an honest conversation there for housing affordability and attainability. But Hawaii is an island. And not everybody that works in Alpharetta has to live in Alpharetta. And that's okay too. And we can be grateful for those people. But I think that we continue to concentrate on the Loop and our, mixed use developments, but that's not what brings everybody to town. There are plenty of people that love the 3rd-acre house that want to send their kids to Cambridge or Milton and be really, really proud of the fact that they're getting a private school education for free. And they're paying for it with property taxes, but there's nothing about school systems in here, and we shouldn't keep paying for stuff that doesn't really give the credit that makes this community what it is. And I think that the attainability conversation is fine, but when you talk, I talked to David Chatham today, who came in front of us 2 years ago to build a 7-house gated neighborhood. And he took one of the houses out. At the time, he thought he was going to build them for $1.1 million and $1.2 million. He took a unit out and is selling each of them for $2 million. Guys, I want to live in a place that's aspirational. And those people are willing to invest here. And you can have all the conversations you want about drivers and economic impact. I didn't move to Alpharetta to live with 200,000 residents. I don't want to live in Sandy Springs. I don't want to live in Buckhead. I don't want to live in Midtown. There's almost 2 jobs for every person who lives here, and that's what we should truly value. If you screw up that and you screw up the schools, you've got nothing. There are plenty of places that have grown to, you can dump all the apartments you want because you're trying to you're a dog chasing its tail. And there are some things that are never, ever going to change. And this community the people who vote still absolutely realize that it's not all the economic data that makes it special. It's the fact that whether you vote for a parks bond or not, it's the fact that the 7 of us invest in infrastructure, and it's nice. And we should value the fact that, we do a great job with our tax digest, and we do a fantastic job with our budgeting process. We've got great infrastructure. People move here for that stuff too. It's not represented anywhere. Thank you.
Any other questions or input? It is a workshop, so.
And I'm not running for re-election.
Well, I'll just say, I think you've done a good job. There's some surprising things in here. Not really the ones that surprised me were more that we're on par as far as our housing ratio with Atlanta. For a while there, people always complained that we didn't have enough rental, but our percentages are right aligned with the metro area and the city of Atlanta. So I think we're in a much healthier position than people portrayed us in like the walls were all going to come crumbling down because we didn't continue to build more and more of the garden apartments and things like that. I'll say that it's always a delicate balance, and affordability is absolutely an issue, especially as you're trying to, develop workforce housing for workforces that live nearby and stuff like that. But it's really difficult, and I think Councilman Burnett, although I would have put it differently, it has hit on something. That's why we go through a comp plan. That's why the information you're providing is so important. Because we weren't elected to fit everybody that wants to be in the city of Alpharetta in this 26 square miles, because that's all we control. And if we controlled all of Metro Atlanta, then you have to be much more sensitive to those balances. But we've only got 26 square miles. And so the people who live here are the people we serve. And the comp plan is about finding out what the people in this community want this city to look like, where we are now and where they want it to be in 5 or 10 years. And so it's all about that delicate balance. Whatever those numbers are, the voters are the ones that tell us whether we've got that right or not. And it's imperative that we pay attention to the data and the components that they may not know about that affect our commercial, office rates and things like that that impact the residential property values and things like that. But I will share that I think I was in a meeting with our community development director, and maybe Councilwoman Richard was in that meeting, and we were having a conversation with another person, a consultant or someone who was talking about, you know, the costs here and workforce housing and how to find more affordable housing. And I made the point that one of the reasons our housing is less affordable now compared to Metro Atlanta than it was 20 years ago is because we as a community, we as a leadership of elected officials over the last 20 years have invested in things that people want. Schools have always been a major factor, and it's important for us to support those and make zoning decisions that protect that valuable asset that draws people from all over the world, our public school system. But my point to the gentleman at the time was, so what you're saying is we need to stop building the Alpha Loop, because every time we invest tens of millions of dollars in amenities, in parks, in infrastructure that people want, that means a few thousand more people want to live here. And so we can't have it both. The more desirable we make this city, the more we drive up the cost of dirt and the housing. And so that's what this is all about, is having a public conversation about where the people want us to be and where we'll find as a leadership group and as electorate of how we'll get there.
If I could respond.
Please. I won't let you.
I'm with you. I mean, I don't disagree with anything that you all said in terms of, you know, what drives housing values. Obviously, you know, you're right. And, you know, I mean, you could look anywhere. Trails are amazing things. You know, 12 feet wide of asphalt driving up housing costs, you know, by 20% just because it's, you know, it's amazing and it's true. And so, yeah, and you have created a place where, you know, people want to be because you've invested in this place and they will invest in this place. And so that is it. And so the only thing I will offer is to say that, because I've been on that side of the argument or the discussion, right? Because I'm with you. But if you talk to, you know, academics and that sort of thing who will talk about the amenity effect and what do, they will tell you that if it is a policy choice, if the folks here decide that housing attainability or whatever you want to call it should be a priority of the city, there are tools that the city has that you can get more attainable housing if that's a policy choice. And that's as far as I'll take that. I'll just point that out, that you're not at the whim of this, you know, at all necessarily. You can impact that, but you don't have to. I mean, you all get to, that's why they pay you the big bucks, right? You get to make that choice on behalf of your people. But, you know, there are policy decisions that can impact that dynamic, at least more than marginally. And
absolutely. Yeah. We can build 6,000 units of rental in 2 years. I guarantee you they'd be beating down our door. Right. And that would raise the affordability. Yeah. The other impacts is a different city, going to Councilman Burnett's point is people didn't move here because they wanted to live in Sandy Springs and couldn't afford it. Most of the people here have looked at other areas in Metro Atlanta and said, you know, Midtown isn't where we want to be. Sandy Springs isn't where we want to be. Great places for a lot of people. Buckhead, you know. We're finding a lot of those people finding Alpharetta more desirable than ever before. So you're right, there are absolutely tools that have impacts as well. Councilman Biner.
I only want to add the one about getting more data on the under 40,000 crowd. I really brought that principally for the fact that I've heard cases brought to MARTA that you brought it, and it's just been ineffective of east-west connectivity, transportation to where the people need it to get to here. And it's not just north and south. So I think that's a valuable tool to have. I hear what you're saying. I completely agree with you. I think we should be focused on investing on the amenities, investing on things, the stuff. People come here for the stuff, and I'm a big believer on that too. But we got to make the case for transportation east-west, and that's a big part of it, because you got plenty of people coming here that can't afford to live here, that service here. And so I think it would be a valuable quiver for us to have to bring it forward, to keep making that case that Not all roads lead south to Atlanta.
Great point. Any other discussion, input? Thanks, sir. We do appreciate it.
I appreciate the opportunity.
And that was a workshop, so there is no vote this evening. And that'll wrap up the workshop portion of tonight's agenda, and we'll move on to the public comment. So, Ms. Cobb, do we have any public comment cards?
Yes, sir. I have 2 public comment cards.
Okay.
Maggie Goldman, 9605 Stony Ridge Lane, Alpharetta.
Do I need to repeat what she just said? No, sometimes you have to repeat your name and stuff. Okay.
No, I'm sorry. We typically ask people to state their name and
Okay.
address
I
only if they haven't submitted a card, and she's
Okay.
already read
I
it.
just want to make sure I'm doing what I'm supposed to do.
I appreciate it.
So I support the efforts of Travis Moyer and his legal representation to file a civil lawsuit against the Alpharetta Police Department and requesting the Fulton County DA to dismiss Moyer's charges and open investigation into the actions of the officers. Alpharetta Open Records Division was quick to deliver to me the relevant body cam video of the canine handler, the 911 call, the police report, and the use of force report, and policies regarding when to use the canine bite use of force. After reviewing these materials, I agree with the reporting that this was a mental health call in which officers arrived on the scene before the ambulance and the situation escalated unnecessarily. I agree with the request to have the felony charge dismissed, as there was nothing that I heard in the 911 call or seen in the body cam video or in the reports that indicate any crime was committed to warrant an arrest in the first place. I am obviously not an investigator and will eagerly wait for Alfred's review of the use of force, but I am going to encourage the Fulton DA to perform her own investigation. A layman's reading of the canine use of force policies do not line up with any of the actions that I saw taken by the canine handler officer. In a press conference on Thursday, one of the attorneys representing Moya, Gerald Griggs, says, "We are here again for a situation we should not have to witness in 2021. Unfortunately, he is right. We like to say this isn't us, meaning that we don't support actions that threaten the lives of our black residents at the hands of police officers. But apparently it is us. And we need to create policies and community environment that makes it unfavorable to perform these acts. Until serious consequences are enacted, I feel events like this will keep occurring. Our residents deserve to live in communities where they won't be treated differently because of the color of their skin." Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Cobb?
Bertle Jackson, 1655 Chasewood Trail, Alpharetta.
It's Burdell Jackson. I've spoken with you, Mr. Mayor, and on several occasions with Mr. Robinson, the police chief, the public safety chief. We meet across the hall as the Alpharetta Race Relations Dialogue. Since that time, I've become a member of the North Fulton chapter of the NAACP. And both times, all 3 times that we've met with Chief Robinson, he's always stressed how his policemen are well trained. I'm concerned based on looking at the video, the body cam video of the deployment of the police dog. If there was a call for a mental health check, an EMT should have been dispatched as opposed to a canine patrol. According to the police policy, canine patrol is backup, but the canine patrol arrived first. So the canine should have never been deployed. And what we have is a failure of policy, the implementation of policy. And Mr. Robinson urged us that he had a good department who was up on their policy and procedures. But clearly, when you sick an attack dog on a person who is experiencing mental problems, there was no crime committed. No crime was committed. He was arrested. He was told to lay down on the ground. He was treated as if he were a perpetrator. We have a problem if that's the case. I'm afraid to call someone if I have someone in my family has a problem, and we have the police come out with a dog. You have a failure in implementing the policy. And Mr. Robinson was very sincere. He was very sincere in saying that he had his guys were at the top of the list. And we've just spent the whole evening talking about how great Alpharetta is. I've lived here for 23 years, so none of you guys were here when I got here. So I've watched this whole scenario evolve. The only gentleman that I know is Mr. Regis over there, and I worked with him as a consulting engineer at Fulton County. A lot of the infrastructure you're talking about, I helped build. So I've been here and watched the evolution. So this is truly my community. And I want to make it plain that I do not like the way that the police dog was deployed. We need to have community police. The previous discussion was based on the fact that the Alpharetta is not a livable city for those folks making less than $100,000. And I'm sure that most of you are not paying Mr. Robinson's staff enough to live in this community. Matter of fact, he has said twice when he met with our race relations dialogue that none of his officers can afford to live in this town. So we're basically bringing in mercenaries to police us. They're not part of our community. They don't participate in the Little League. They get in their car and go back home, someplace else. So we have a problem, but I want to focus on Mr. Robinson's staff, and they need to be trained, and I want the commission here, the council, to review the policy of implementing the police dog. If the police dog, the canine patrol arrived first, he should have waited, because that's the first line in the policy of deployment of canine dogs. Wait. It says they're backup, not a first line of enforcement. So that's the problem we have. And I urge you to review that and let us citizens know what the deal is after you have reviewed the policy and the implementation of same. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Are those the only public comment cards we had?
Yes, sir.
But if there is anyone else that would like to come forward, now is your opportunity to do so. Seeing no one, we'll close public comment. Reports. Councilwoman Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A week from Wednesday, we'll have our August CZIM meeting at 6 o'clock. We have 2 public hearing items on August 11th. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell and then Councilwoman Merkel.
I don't want to go without mentioning this yesterday. Billy Bates, one of our, he was just a gem of a gentleman. He chronologically kept up with the families in this area for generations. He was a 95-year-old World War II veteran, one of the last of the greatest generation. And I tell you, what he did for our history and recording it and sharing that data with everybody was just incredible. He was a 30-year volunteer firefighter with the city of Alpharetta, so he goes back and volunteered in an incredible way. His son was one of our former police chiefs or fire chiefs. And he will be missed, and our community is less because he's passed on. So,
Councilman Merkel.
Yes, I'd be remiss as liaison to Parks and Rec if I didn't point out the fact that our Director of Parks and Recreation spent his entire birthday evening in this room listening to us to carry on. Hopefully Janet's got some cake ready for you when you get home, but happy birthday to Morgan.
Any other reports? Well, I'm sorry that 2 speakers left before we had a chance to respond. Public comment's not really an opportunity for back and forth and answering questions, but I just want to make sure everyone knows that the people on this dais, the people that work for this city, the people that live in this city, take everything our public safety department does very seriously. We spend a tremendous amount of time and money training our officers, but they're human beings. And I've learned in my 10 years on this council that from time to time when incidents happen, like the one that happened last week, it's best that I wait until I know the facts. Because if you make decisions or you make opinions based on news reports or social media accounts and things like that, it can get you in trouble. And so there's a reason I haven't said anything public about what's happened, because I don't know all of the facts yet. Every time there is a use of force incident in the city of Alpharetta, our public safety department does a thorough investigation of all of the facts and details surrounding that incident. Whether someone is injured or not, if an officer pulls their gun out of their holster, that counts as a use of force. And we do that same process, whether it's something extremely tragic or whether it's something relatively minor, because we want to make sure our officers are trained in doing the right thing. Does that mean they're perfect? Absolutely not. That's why we do the investigations. So I have asked Director Robinson if he could come and just perhaps give us an update when they expect their investigation to be completed, and any other comments he'd like to make at this time.
Good evening. As you said, Mayor, we do what's called a use of force review for every use of force incident. A use of force, just to clarify, can be something as simple as laying hands on a person's wrist to get them into custody. If there's any kind of physical contact at all, we consider that a use of force. And so we have a process for every use of force where it starts with supervision, review, supervisor review, then it goes up the chain. Training also reviews it, and if there is any kind of questions or concerns, it'll end up on my desk as well. So we, as you said, review every use of force. No different with this one. We immediately began to review it last week. We also, once the complainant or the subject in this still has not contacted our department. They have not filed a complaint with us, but again, that doesn't dictate how we do business. We review it regardless of whether there's a complaint or not. But once the press conference was held by the complainant and his attorneys on Thursday, then our next goal was to be as transparent as we could be with what we had. They had their own video, and they put that out. And then Friday, we sent, and I have sent this all to you this evening, we sent to all press outlets in the metro area a copy of the body cam video from the officer, a copy of the 911 call, a copy of the incident report, and a statement updating, kind of a play-by-play of what happened and also status where we are. So we are about done with the review. I expect to have a statement to put out to you and to the citizens and to the press in the next couple of days or so with our findings, but that's where we are right now. I don't typically comment on things like this in public, but there's one thing that I guess has especially bothered me that has gotten some folks especially upset, and because of headlines saying that the gentleman was handcuffed, and I do want to say clearly he was not handcuffed when this took place. I know that's what a lot of headlines are saying, and people tend to get upset just based on a headline, but the video, as you will see if you look, clearly shows he was not handcuffed when he was bitten, so whatever that's worth. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Any questions from council? Thank you very much, sir. And I have received some emails, as I'm sure fellow members of council have received emails or calls, some from friends, some from residents, some from surrounding municipalities. And I have told every one of them the same thing. Wait until I have the facts. Wait till we have the report. And I'll be glad to sit down with anybody and have that conversation, including the folks that spoke here or anybody else that wants to talk about it. We're not afraid to look very closely at how we operate, especially within such a sensitive area as our public safety department. but we are going to do it the right way, and we're not going to sensationalize, and we're not going to come out and throw out half-truths without knowing all the facts at the time. So take whatever you will from that. That's all I have for this report. Ladies and gentlemen, we are adjourned.